I know.
I'm with you.
I know.
See? Look.
Oh, yes.
I think
Is it
she's
6
all-
o'clock?
Yeah.
It is 6
They already
o'clock.
agreed to that
Okay.
before. Okay.
Guys, we're going to have, how do you want to do executive session?
I scheduled.
We don't
it for
typically have
6,
this many people in here, and I don't know.
And then the regular meeting immediately following, so.
Right.
No, I know, I understand that, but I'm just saying about where we're going to have executive session.
Oh, they can either leave or we could go upstairs.
I'll take the elevator.
You sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then you carry me down.
Okay.
We can do the.
So,
Carry.
what's that? I don't know. Okay, so Wendy, would you please call the roll?
Council President Paul M. Roderick.
Here.
Vice President Thomas P. Welch III.
Here.
Councilor Terry Flynn.
Here?
Councilor Christopher M. Logan.
Here.
Councilor M. Teresa Santos.
Yeah.
Councilor Dennis B. Tarano.
Here.
Councilor Barbara A. Von Billis.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Wendy. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, everyone, good evening and welcome. We are having an executive session at 6 o'clock. So let's read that in, and then we'll go upstairs, and you guys can stay here, okay? And then when we finish up there, we never know what time that is, depending upon what we have. And then when we come back, we'll start the regular meeting, okay? Okay. Number one, executive session pursuant to provisions of Rhode Island General Law, Sections 42462, 42464, and 42465A. Number one, land acquisition. 5, land acquisition. And 5, lease of JFK School. Review, discussion, and/or potential action, and/or vote in executive session and/or in open session.
Motion to recess open session and reconvene in executive session.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to recess open session and reconvene in executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Anybody opposed? We'll go upstairs and we'll be back when
When we finish.
we finish the executive session agenda, okay? Sorry. You guys ready? Yep. Who are we waiting for?
Number, nobody.
Okay, Mr. Welch.
Motion to recess executive session, reconvene in open session. Motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion to seal the executive session minutes pursuant to section 42467 of Rhode Island General Law.
Second?
Motion is second to seal the executive session minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's move on to the public forum. Number 2, pursuant to Rule 25 of the Rules of the Council, citizens may address the town on one subject only. Said subject of substantive town business, neither discussed during the regular meeting nor related to personnel or job performance. Citizens may speak for no longer than 5 minutes and must submit a public participation form to the council clerk prior to the start of the meeting. All items discussed during this session will not be voted upon.
No form.
No forms. Excellent. Okay. Let's move on to number 3, contract memorandum of Rosemary K. Kreger, Superintendent of Schools in reference to teacher assistant contract, Middletown Association of Auxiliary Personnel / NEARA / NEA.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second?
Motion is second to receive. All in favor?
Aye.
Is she here?
No, I'm here. No, she's not. She couldn't make it.
Okay. Teresa, just come on up, your name and address, and
I apologize.
I didn't recognize you in that fancy mask. You said, I'm here. I'm looking at you. I go, who are you?
I just came from a
I
very
apologize.
wet soccer game, so I apologize for my appearance, and I forgot to...
Listen, no apology needed. No apology needed.
Teresa Spangler, 132 Peckham Lane, and Chair of the School Committee. So I just wanted to, as you have in front of you, the proposed agreement for our teacher assistants. You can see that the total dollar amount with steps and the increase in salary is $30,205. So we thank you for taking the time to take a look at this. It's 36 full-time positions, 13 part-time positions, and you can see the proposal of 1% on all steps. And this is a one-year rollover contract with no changes in terms or conditions.
Okay.
So we'd like you to consider it in hopes that you would be able to vote on it. Can you vote on it this evening, Wendy? Is it?
No, they have to wait till the next meeting.
Till the next meeting, okay.
They receive the fiscal impact statement.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do hope you consider this seriously. It's a great, very cost efficient with only a $30,000 price tag on it. So, you have any questions or anything?
Anybody have any questions of the chairperson of the school committee? No, I think it's pretty black and white as far as a one-year rollover. It makes sense, at least in my opinion. I'll just put that out there. I think it's reasonable, and I think also that, you know, obviously we have to wait the grace period before we actually approve it.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Flynn?
Yes, thank you. I have a question, and it does seem very reasonable and in keeping with what the other departments in the town are
Yep.
doing. I have no problem with that. Procedurally, though, the memo says that the council needs to approve the contract, and my question is, does the town solicitor or finance director review the actual contract, or is it just the school department solicitor?
Oh, well, it typically would be the school department's attorney, but I don't believe, other than the financial terms, that there's
Right.
any change to the language of the contract.
Okay.
It's simply just the wage increase, if that's correct, Madam Chair.
Yes, that is correct. There's no changes in the contract. It is stated right here. I just saw that. I apologize. This is a one-year rollover contract, no changes in terms or conditions. It's a 1% increase on all steps. So yes, you would look at just the fiscal aspect of it, whereas the contract and the language, our attorney and the school committee and the teachers' assistant union works on those things.
No, which is fine. It's just since we have to approve it, I just wanted to know which eyes were on it. That's all.
Oh, well, our legal went through it first, and then we, in our finance, and then I'm sure Sean had Mark had a discussion.
So,
If there were any changes to the terms and conditions or language of the contract, we'd have an opportunity to see those, but there aren't any in this case, so it's, yeah.
That's what I wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Teresa. Okay, any further questions? Mr. Welch?
Motion to receive said fiscal impact statement.
Second.
We have a motion to second to receive said impact statement, fiscal impact statement. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to committee updates. Number 4, communication of open space and fields. Chairperson Nicholas Coogan in reference to pickleball courts in Middletown.
Good evening, Nick Coogan.
Hang on one second, Nick. We need a motion to receive.
Yep. Motion to receive said communication.
Second.
We have a motion to second to receive. All in favor?
Aye.
How you doing, Nick?
Good evening, Nick Coogan, 31 Winter Green Drive. Speaking to you tonight as chairman of the Open Space and Fields Committee. Our committee was tasked some time ago to look at possible sites in town where we could put public pickleball courts. And I think you have our data that we submitted here, our findings. We looked at seven sites in town that would be sort of optimal. 2 at Linden Park, 1 at Valley Park behind the shopping center there, 1 sort of down by where Burma Road and Green Lane intersect, Potsy Field and Tibbetts Farm and Boulevard Nurseries. And we had 16 criteria that we came up with and that were also were submitted to us from interested parties. Just what type of things would be important if we were looking at a place to put such courts. And there are things, as you can see, currently level and flat, easily adaptable to ADA. There's 16 of them, proximity to town businesses. So our committee visited all 7 of these sites and just did a scoring as far as yes or no, do they meet these criteria? And what we did is we narrowed it down to 3 sites that we thought would be the best places for a pickleball court. Our first, and you have some, I think we submitted some rough maps that Warren Hall had prepared at the time when the only sites that we thought were available was Linden Park. So the first site that we thought was the best, most promising site was the southwest corner of Linden Park as you come up the driveway on the lower field there on the left. And there's it's almost ready-made for it's level, it's well-drained, there's ample parking. But if you were to, of those 7 properties we looked at, potential properties, that was, in our opinion, the one that was the best candidate for pickleball courts. The second site, there was a second site at Linden Park that we sort of eliminated from our study, and that was up in the northeast corner there, kind of abutting the houses that are on Oak Avenue, and it would have been right up against the fence there, and that we felt was a little too close to the abutters. But what we did look at was in the upper field of Linden Park, there's a little playground area. That would be an area that we could put pickleball courts in and then very easily relocate that playground area to another place right there in Linden Park. So the kids that use the playground, it's not a very big playground area, the kids that use that could still be accommodated there, but that would be another optimal location in Linden Park if we're still looking at Linden. The third choice we had was Potsy Field, and it's a good area, but I think in our opinion that area seems to be a little in flux as to what's going to happen there. So we wouldn't want to put a lot of time, effort, and resources into something that down the road would no longer be usable or would not be optimal or would have to be moved. So our recommendation from the Open Space Committee would be that that lower southwest corner of Linden Park would be the best area for public pickleball courts, and the diagrams that you have there shows a footprint with four public courts there. There's already parking. You're right next to, you're fairly close to West Main Road, so I think concern for noise from pickleball probably would be would be drowned out by by noise from West Main Road. On the other, also, up until some years ago, there was a public school there. So you had students, you had recess, you had school buses. So it was an area that did have some traffic, has had the history of some traffic in the past. And so that would be the recommendation of our committee, that that would be the location that I think we would want to put our pickleball courts. We would, it's kind of ready-made.
Okay. City councils have any questions? Dennis?
Yeah, I just want, this is my first time on the committee, and Nick, I think you do a great job at these meetings. It's very thorough. The committee did a great job. The little field trip, we went to all these different locations, had a score sheet, went through, discussed each of the properties, came back and ranked them, had a couple meetings, and so I think it's done a good job, and I think they picked the right location.
Okay. Have you had any conversations with any of the neighbors up there?
I have not had any conversations, no, not yet.
Okay. Because I know, I don't know, it was 2, maybe 3 years ago the most,
More than that.
when it was proposed there before, potentially, we got some pushback.
That was, I was aware, I didn't have any personal conversation, but I was aware of that.
Okay.
And just at the time, all that was said was maybe Linden Park. There was nothing specific as to where in Linden Park. And, you know, again, just the fact that, I mean, the West Main Road is right there, so it's not as if it's a, it's not a churchyard. There's some noise there, and there are people that use the park.
Okay.
So it's just, I think we're all aware of the publicity with, for the growing sport of pickleball. So if the Middletown does choose to build or to help with facilitate courts, that would be the location for it. And I think the pickleball folks, there may be some here who can speak to that also, but I think they think that's a good location also.
Okay. Vice President.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. And I would like to say that I looked at those sites as well, and no question, Linden Park is the spot to go. As far as the neighbors go, I completely understand, but a couple of things. One, I agree with Nick. It was a school. There was bells, buses, all the rest of it. So pickleball, I don't think is going to send them over the edge. And it is a municipal piece of property. Then, I mean, what did you think it was going to be? You know. So I do agree, though. Moving the playground's a great idea. We could shift the playground. You know, maybe pickleball has a more central spot, kind of where the playground is now. And if I were IHOP, I'd put a gate in the fence and a couple of tables back there. It would be perfect.
One of our criteria was, business activity in the area, and I think, like you say, Pancake House and Creamery might be kind of happy to have 20 people hanging out there playing pickleball, and then going out for a coffee and stuff like that. So.
And I also think we hear about the west side of town doesn't have, as much as the east side of town. All right, that might be more centrally located, but is on public transportation. And also, I take care of a property in Newport where the people are putting in their own pickleball court, and I wasn't aware of this, but they have remade the balls to take away the pop noise that it makes, so they're much quieter. And I think that on top of it is a great spot. I just wonder, we keep talking about all the other facets of the community, and this is, I mean, there was a lot of seniors that came to that, or I call them seniors my age, came to, maybe I am, I don't know, came to the open space and gave their spiel a number of times. And there's a lot of people. I wasn't aware of how many people play pickleball. So I think it is something that we should get behind.
Okay. Parking, Nick, you looked at the amount of parking spaces, and
I think we would
I
probably...
mean, tournament-wise, and it seems like it's pretty popular, and from what I see, I mean...
But, there's also, I remember we had soccer games with our kids when we were, when the kids were little there, and there was a lot of people there then. So we could, if we needed to, polish up the parking spot a little bit to make some more defined spaces. But as it was, I mean, we were there with our kids playing in soccer and lacrosse games, and everyone was able to get in there.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't be in favor of moving the playground. I think you're wise putting it down where you suggesting to put it, closer to the road, because it keeps you further away from those neighbors as well. I think that's probably a good compromise and fair, being closer to that end of the property, so. Sean, what would be the next, what's the next step?
I would take the recommendation and work with the town engineer to create a plan and a budget and bring that back to the council.
Okay. Last time we looked at this, it was around 210.
I believe so.
That
yes.
number 210,000 sticks in my mind. Now, I don't know where that was. It's going to depend upon the grade and what's there and the drainage already and stuff like that. But if we're going to do it, we got to make sure we do it right, so we don't have drainage problems like we do over at the tennis courts and that kind of stuff. So we'll look at long-term maintenance costs as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
Mrs. Santos.
Good evening, sir. I have a few questions. How many members do you have coming to play pickleball?
I don't know, but there are some pickleball players here tonight that could give you an estimate of how many.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, who's going to maintain this? Would the members of this organization be maintaining the property, or will the town be maintaining it?
Again, we'll have to look at it. I don't know that there's much maintenance. It's not a lawn that has to be mowed. It's a hard surface, and
okay.
I don't know. We'll have to check with them if they take the nets down when they're not playing, but it would be a hard surface with permanent lines on it. So, again, they could, the actual pickleball players could give you specific answers to that.
Okay. My next question is going to be, if you have a large crowd, are you going to be parking over at IHOP?
I don't know.
Okay.
Apparently, someone's saying
All
no.
right.
I don't know. Right, if you did now, you would have to hop the fence. I don't think that would happen, or walk around.
And
so,
my last question, I believe this council discussed the area by Gaudet School, or was I dreaming that night?
You were dreaming. You were dreaming. You were in deep sleep. No, it was Gaudet.
It was Gaudet.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
What happened to that
the
suggestion?
idea by Gaudet was, the first concern was it's on school property and it wouldn't be available to be used during school hours. It turns out that, in fact, it may be possible for it to be used during school time, but it is right there in a part of the field that's also used by every other sport there is. The Pop Warner people are there. One of the small baseball groups is there. And the other fact that was pointed out to me by a teacher, even though that would not be something for the school kids, you have 4th and 5th graders going out for recess during the day, and it would not be optimal for the pickleball organization to have to go out there and compete with school kids and when school was in session. So it was determined that that would not be an optimal choice for a court location.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, Nick, what is there? I don't know a lot about pickleball. Just what I've learned over the past couple of years. Is there night tournaments? I mean, is it just during the day?
I would have to check with the people here who actually play.
That's what that would really determine for me, is this the right spot or not? Because if it's night and there's lights, that's a whole nother discussion, you know? So I don't know, but we have to find out. These are things we need to know. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, the idea of lights had not come into our discussion when we were looking at possible locations.
So does like down in Morton Park or Morton Avenue where they have, I think that's where I read that there's some pickleball courts, and I think Tiverton might have some as well.
Building some, I believe.
Do they have lights there?
I don't know if they have them or not.
Because I just, if that's the route we're gonna go, I wanna make sure we have the right location. Because you know what happens, it gets there and then they come back and go, well, now we want lights. Okay, we probably should talk about that at the beginning, you know, which, you know. So I don't know, Mr. Welch.
I'd just say that I think it's a warm weather sport. The sunlight is up quite a bit in the summer, so I don't see the need for lights, and why can't we just say that's the spot, you're not getting lights?
You say that now, but the next council might say something different, you know, so you gotta look long-term, I mean. So it's just a an avenue for discussion, not saying no, by no means. It certainly seems like, listening to some of the councils, would be in favor of that. Just want to make sure that we see the big picture of everything. Okay?
Do we have to make a motion?
No, I think we're just receiving it.
Yeah.
Mr. President, Fred DeFinis had...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Is Fred here? Fred is here. That's right, Fred. I thought I recognized you when you said hi to me. Okay. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate your time.
I'd like to put some answers back, too.
Okay. Fred, just come on up and state your name and address for the record. And
Thank you. Fred DeFinis, 16 Evelyn Circle, Middletown, Rhode Island. And I think I can answer all the questions that you just brought up to Nick.
I had a funny feeling you could.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I don't know if I'll have them in the correct order, but
That's okay.
the estimates we got last year on flat level ground, specifically Linden Park, was $120,000.
Okay.
We specifically excluded lights in our proposal. As Councilor Welch said, it's generally a daytime sport, and also we want to be sensitive to neighbor concerns as well.
Okay.
As far as the noise issue, we also did some of our own tests there at that particular site, again, on the noise of the paddle and the ball. And Jane Thomas, who's back there with me, and we took the loudest paddle that's manufactured and the loudest ball that's made, and we smacked it as hard as we could with one person with their back to the sound of the ball. Okay. And we kept pacing off. And long story short, if the courts were located where Mr. Hall drew them, you wouldn't hear it at any of the houses down there, because noise, as you may know, dissipates on an inverse square basis. So every time you double the distance, you reduce the noise by a quarter. So if you're 4 times as far away, you get 1/16 of the noise, and so on. So people in those areas adjacent will not hear the balls. You've probably read about the thing down at Hunter Park in Newport.
Yep.
Those houses, well, one of the houses, their shop is literally this far from the pickleball fence. It's a whole different ball game. Here we're talking about close to 100 yards or more from that location that Mr. Hall drew to the nearest abutters, so we're not going to have that. Councilor Santos had asked how many pickleball players there are. I don't know them all, Councilor. I personally have an email list approaching 100 here on the island, not all in Middletown, of course. I know that Bristol Pickleball has a mailing list of over 600 people, many of the same people, because we go up there to play. We go to Barrington and play. We go to Dartmouth and play, Lakeville, Massachusetts and play. It sounds a little strange that people from Newport County are driving up to...
Going off the island.
Not off the island.
That's a big step.
We have to bring our passports to play pickleball, but it's a little bit silly. We had a lot of people who wanted to support us here tonight from the island, and we asked them not to come because out of respect for COVID concerns and crowding the room. But there are a lot, and if we have a good facility, there will be a lot more. I think I addressed the cost, the number of people, the noise issue, and the Councilor Santos.
She does have another question. Yes, ma'am.
You're saying
yes,
you
sir.
have a number, thank you, sir. You say you have a number of people. Roughly how many are playing on a specific night? How often do you play?
Personally?
Anybody?
Well, there are people who play every day.
Okay.
And it varies by day part.
Okay, how many people would be playing on one particular day?
At one time,
yes,
on 4 courts, 20, 24 people.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
So, Fred, does anybody, you have any questions? No? So, Fred, so it is a year-round sport? I know Tom said it's kind of a warm weather sport,
well,
but...
generally above 40 degrees. Oh, Councilor Santos asked about maintenance. The courts are warranted for 25 years. They don't require any maintenance, and usually what you get is some leaves and debris on there, and typically the players bring brooms or sweepers and take care of that. So there won't be any town maintenance to speak.
So are the nets?
And the nets stay.
The nets stay, the caps,
Just like
so
tennis.
no water gets in and freezes and expands the courts and...
just like
Because
tennis.
we just ran into that problem at the tennis courts.
Yeah, well, what we're proposing for the $120,000 is what's called post-tension concrete slab, where they pour the concrete and they draw high-tension wires through it. It provides a monolithic slab that's impervious to freezing, cracking, and there's drainage under the slab. I think you mentioned the drainage issue.
Yep.
And there's drainage under the slab. That was included in the price. I will say that, you know, this was about a year ago now, so costs have probably gone up, you know, with materials,
Sure.
and labor costs, and
Yeah.
as we're experiencing every year.
Yeah. So maybe I had my numbers backwards, 120, 210, you know, I'm
Yeah.
not sure, but it's quite a difference. So,
Yes.
so
The
is
last
it-
thing I would like to say with respect to the funding is that we have a subgroup within our group that is very enthusiastic and interested in working on grants and outside funding, but we've been stymied thus far because we don't have a location. So if the council can approve the location, we can get to work on the funding, and I think everybody wins in that case.
Okay. When is it typically played? During the day, I would imagine.
It depends on the people. People my age play during the day, you know, 8 to 12, 8 to 2, something like that.
Okay.
People who work, like, well, some of the younger people, they're still working. They'll come by, you know, 5 o'clock, play 5 to 7, or whatever the sunlight will allow. And then on weekends, of course, it's daytime too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I know it's tough to determine how, or predict how big it could get.
Yeah.
You know, someone like Bristol that has 600,
Yeah.
how many courts do they have? Do you know?
Well, they don't really have any. They set up temporary courts, but they'll get 40 to 60 people on a good day.
So they're coming to Middletown, is that what you're telling me?
Some of them will come
Okay.
here. And we go
I
there.
understand.
No, it's a growing thing, and that's one of the great things too, is the social interaction. We have friends from all these communities now
Sure.
that we never would have met.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions of Fred? So, Sean, next step is just, you're gonna give it to Warren, you're gonna come up with the potential cost,
A plan and a cost.
plan and cost. How long?
1 month.
1 month. We'll see you in a month, hopefully.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch, the Vice President has another question.
Just one more question, not necessarily you, Fred, but probably more to Sean. Is there some lane in the town's budget that would allow, would have a place that could fund part or all of this construction?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah, it could be all of it. Absolutely, it could be part of it.
We'll present those options once we have a budget, but we are always creative and try to find solutions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Appreciate the information. And Nick, thank you for the recommendation and the update. Thanks for your work. Okay. And thank you for the pickleball people that came out to listen. Okay, number 5, communication to Charlie Roberts, co-chair, Middletown Public Schools Building Committee, in reference to update regarding the Phase 1 submission.
Motion receive said communication.
Second?
Motion is second to receive. All in favor? Aye. Okay, Charlie, how you doing?
Good evening, how are you? Wait, you wanna wait?
Yeah, we'll give you a minute. Sorry.
That was a support group.
I would, see, I'd have the noise decibel meter right now, measuring it up.
I'm pretty sure the IHOP's louder.
Well, that's at midnight.
Right. I'm gonna recuse myself in this conversation.
And I'm between the two of you.
Okay.
Okay, let's close the door, come on. Oh, this shit.
Make me follow pickleball, it's tough.
Charlie, I heard you're the future president of pickleball.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I got enough.
Ron's gonna close the door. Okay.
Thanks,
Mr.
Ron.
Roberts.
All right, thank you. Charlie Roberts, 27 Elephant Lane, up here tonight as the co-chair of the Middletown Public Schools Building Committee. What we wanted to do here is give you guys regular updates of our work. We have a lot of stuff happening as we presented the last time. But first, thank you for your support on the LOI submittal for the Phase 1. Really appreciate you voting and signing that document, and we did successfully submit that on September 15th.
Awesome.
So I appreciate that support on that. You know, now stage 2 has begun. It's, well, first, I want you to know all the documents can be found off, we have a link off the Middletown Public Schools site that's building committee. So we're putting all these documents up there. The phase 1 submission was a binder about that big. So, you know, at any time anyone wants to see anything in the community, they can go off of that button and view those documents. So. On to stage 2 is what we're doing now. There's a lot of work, as we talked about the last time, in stage 2. The first thing, you know, one of the first things, oh yeah, we have some slides, I think. Here we go. You can go to the next one. So critical paths, there's a number of things we're working on right now. The first thing is we have an educational planner on board. We have an educational plan being developed right now. We expect that draft report any minute now, basically. So it's should be coming to us tomorrow morning, maybe at the latest. So, so that's one thing. And part of that is all the community outreach that we did, some of our visioning sessions that we held already. That's going to include that. Frank Locker has also held meetings with the principals of our school districts as well. He recently just did that, and that'll be incorporated. That portion is going to continue. We're going to continue to build upon that as well. And with that, we'll then include teachers, students, and some more community outreach that I'll talk about later. Also, the architects. We have architects under supervision of Colliers. We are very active right now. We have scanned all the schools. So basically, we've taken, you know, instead of fumbling through some old blueprints, we now have scanned every single school. We have real numbers, real measurements, accurate measurements for all the schools, and that's going to be very helpful for us as we go forward. They will be working on developing some of our space needs and then eventually some of our conceptual designs as well. So that work is ongoing as we speak right now. You know, one of the other things too is community outreach. When we held our workshop, we really took that to heart, and I think all of us were already starting to do that. But we have now set up a little subcommittee of our building committee that's really working on community outreach. Part of that is going to be some open houses. We're going to open up the schools to the community, allow them to come in and view them. I think you all have been invited back to the schools as well. If you want to come and view the schools, please do that. And then also, I think we're going to come up with some nice marketing material to really even explain what the building committee is, what we're all about, what we're working on. A lot of people in the community may not know that, so we're going to be working on that. We've gotten the help of Matt Shealy, which has been very helpful on that matter, and thank you for that support as well. I think on top of that, we probably will also reach out to other community organizations. We'll meet with the Senior Center and any other organization out there that wants to, and that's part of this outreach we really want to push forward. So you can go on the next slide if you want, please. So as you can see, these are the different stages that we've been talking about. Stage 1 has been submitted. Stage 2 is going to be due. If you go to the next one as well, that really breaks down the major steps in front of us. So we have stage 1 in. Stage 2 is we have a lot of work to do, which we're working on now. You're going to see us a lot coming back to the council here. So get used to us, because we do want to keep you involved, and really we need your help. We need your support. We need your guidance as we prepare the stage 2 portion for this application. And then of course, you know, out of this all, at that point we'll know what we need to do to go to the voters in November. So you can go on to the next slide, please. This is kind of a breakdown of the active items we're working on right now. You can see the educational planning, develop the space needs, developing conceptual designs, review of those with the school administration. Eventually, we're going to come to you with those conceptual designs here as well. I'll probably put a request in this week to do another workshop with you at the end of this month. We'd really like to do that. Maybe even offer it up at the high school if we could pull that off. I think that would be something. Maybe do it at one of the schools. So again, a lot of work happening. There's a lot of people working on this. Community members are very engaged, and we're pushing this forward to really come up with, you know, what we think are some good ideas for some of our needs in our schools. Next slide, please. Day-to-day stuff, weekly stuff. Our OPM Colliers is here tonight. They are constantly meeting with the architects. We're also having formal weekly meetings as well. We have now a building subcommittee, like I talked about, for community outreach. So we are going to continue to meet regularly on that as well. And again, we're meeting with the building principals and open up again tours to the town council as well. And then I think that's it. Last slide. Any questions?
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Roberts?
I have a comment.
Mr. Welch?
So I'd just like to say that Charlie is doing an awesome job. Puts a lot of time into it. He's very passionate, so it's nice to be involved with a committee that is everybody cares. And I think I would impress upon all of you to come visit the schools, because we did see some of the deficiencies that the schools have on a piece of paper, but it is much different when you see it in person. Chris and I did Gaudet the other day, and you know, we got a very good tour, and I think the staff, we went with the principal and the janitor, and no, Gaudet was principal and two principals, yep. And you know, you can ask them anything you want, and you get access to anywhere in the school, so it's very good to lay your eyes on. And I personally have one school left to do, which I'm going to try to get to this week, and again, I will tell you when I'm going if anybody wants to come with me or needs a ride. And anyway, I do want to circle back to the high school, and we'll go back to any of the schools if anybody wants to go. So please all go look at it so we can make a good decision.
Is there any appetite to tour it as a group, as a council?
I have a question when you finish.
Sure.
I mean, I think it'd be a good idea if we were all, like, when we were all there, when we looked at ball fields and we looked at what we needed for fields years back, and now you see the finished product up at the old drive-in where there's the multi-purpose fields. So, I mean, we did due diligence where, you know, we visited different sites and stuff like that. So I think if, you know, we're really going to make informed decisions about, I think a lot of it has to be visual. For me, anyway, can't speak, it's visual. I'm a visual person. You can see it on paper, and you can go, well, yeah, I don't know. Or you can say, yeah, I guess so. Or you can actually see it and go, yeah, or no.
Right.
So I'd like to maybe potentially schedule something where we can go there as a group, meet there as a group, and then just visit the schools and tour the schools so we can see with our own eyes. And at the same time, if there's, you know, maybe invite the public at the same time, or maybe it's a different time. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me, but I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between going there. If your kids are at the school, you're at the school, you kind of look around.
It would have to be a Saturday.
Yeah, if you're going there to look at the school and really inspect it, I think you would find it very helpful.
Yeah, okay. Mrs. Flynn.
This would be one Saturday or one vacation day, and we would see all the schools. Is that the proposal?
Yes.
We would go to every school.
Yes.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, we just take, you know, 3 or 4 hours, meet at 8 or 9 in the morning, and you can bring breakfast, and I'm just kidding. Or buy breakfast, I'm just kidding. And I'm just kidding. So, and then we would just go, you know, we maybe meet at the high school and take a look at there and see what the needs are there, based upon what their ideas are.
The police.
Or what they have on their assessment already. And then we can go to the middle school, and then we can go to Forest, and then we can go to Aquidneck. And I think that, you know, that way it's done in one day, and not to just get it done, but at least we see with our own eyes what the needs are, based on what versus what they have on paper versus the assessment, and answer any of those questions at that time. Mr. Welch.
I'd just like to say that I think that's a great idea, and I think we should do it sooner rather than later, because the more you see, the more questions you can have answered. And if we are able to go through all the schools, you get a relative feel for, you know, we heard from Mrs. Krager that the average age is 61 years. So you start to see the same pieces of infrastructure all the way around that haven't been touched. So it helps you in the end, because we're going to have to decide which projects to go after. So if you do get to see them all, I think that'd be very helpful.
Okay. Hang on one second, Teresa.
I just want to say
Hang,
that
go ahead.
whatever date you decide, when you all talk, and I'm sure you'll have advertising because you would all be together.
Yes.
Just let us know, give us a couple dates. You can email Mrs. Krager, and we will make sure that we have somebody to be able to show you around each of the buildings, because it'd be a Saturday, so we'd have to coordinate that with our guys.
Understood.
But we can certainly make that happen and welcome you to that, because I think that's a great idea.
Yep.
And then again, if you put that as a public meeting, then some folks in the community could join you, which would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Council Toronto.
This is Santos was first.
Oh. If I miss you, I apologize. You don't have to get upset with me. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Mr. Roberts, as you look at the rest of my colleagues, they're all much younger than I am. I'm going to ask a favor of you, and I think my colleagues will understand. I had a bad mishap last week. So I would like to know, let them go as a group. Could I individually meet with someone at the school when school's not in session, or whenever it would be available for me to come and tour the schools by myself?
Absolutely.
At my pace.
I will wheel you.
What did he say?
He will take you.
Okay. All right, so it'd be the two of us and the rest of the council would go as a group. Would
Yes.
that be?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can accommodate that.
But you're much younger than I am, sir, and you move faster than I am.
I will push you.
You gonna put me in a wheelchair?
He's saying he'll make sure you.
I didn't say that. I
Make
said
sure you're
I'll-
safe is what he's saying.
All right,
Okay, Council Toronto.
okay.
Thank you, Mr.
sir.
President. Charlie, thanks for all your help on this. It's a very interesting program. This program was initiated by the state, correct?
The whole necessity of schools construction, yes.
Yes. And the mission statement for this is basically around the school. And I keep hearing an education position on this as well. The funding is for the school itself. It's not going to be buying equipment, or is it? Buying equipment to put in the building as well? Desks, chairs, books, computers. I mean, is that part of it?
It could be. I mean, the educational component of that is to really determine what we need out of our schools. You know, 21st century learning is a term that's out there a lot, that we need to really examine that. We don't just want to go and do, you know, improvements on the school without knowing that it's what the community needs, what local employers are asking for. You know, it's incorporating all of that.
I agree. But the funding that's going to come for this is, can it be used to buy equipment for the school? In other words, you say we're going to create a lab, and the lab's we're going to open it up, create a lab, put 21st century equipment in there. Will this program that the state's funding, will that fund the actual equipment itself?
It's meant for, I think it will, but I'll let Holly answer that. So.
Hi, I'm Holly Demers from Colliers.
Hi, Holly.
Hi. There's different components that are paid for. So the furniture, fixtures, and equipment is paid for if it's a like new. So if you added a wing, all of the furniture in that wing would be paid for with the bond. If you were doing a science lab and it was all permanent, that's paid for with the bond. So anything that you can physically take out of a building is not part of the bond unless it's a new wing and we can establish that it's like new construction.
Okay, so it's attached to the building
Right,
of
so
some
science
way.
labs, all of that would be part of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Because there's different funding out there for different programs. I mean, there's a lot of funding at the state level right now that they have rules and regulations on how you can use this funding. So there might be additional funding that we can get equipment if it's not attached to the building.
Right.
One of the things that you had mentioned, and what brought that up too, is I love your term of outreach, because we've started a department in Middletown called the Middletown Department of Outreach to reach to the community, and we have a study going on right now who is doing, and we just got the report back. I just talked to Sean. We paid for a report to talk to different associations around the community, Newport, Middletown, Portsmouth. Terry and I have been working on interviewing folks, and we've got a lot of good feedback, and we're going to have even more feedback. So maybe we can coordinate with the school about what you guys are doing, because it sounds like you're also, you had mentioned an outreach to the community to find different educational needs of the school.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then that's part of this committee?
Well, this committee is not just only the ride application. So this committee was formed, a major reason it started, and we took the ride formula for its organization. But this is really going to be, we hope to be a committee that lives on and helps maintain these schools over many years.
Right.
And advance them and, you know, give the facilities the proper care that they need. So we are looking at other opportunities. We'd like to work with your economic advisory board. You know, a lot of this is, you know, our high school principal is very passionate about CTE programs, and I think that's something that we really can look at. I mean, some people don't even know in this town there's a biomed program in our high school that, you know, could really help out someone going from high school right into a career. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. We'd like to take advantage of them as many as we can. Right now, our focus is on the ride submission. I'll be honest, it's taking up a lot of our time. But, you know, we are looking at other options as well.
Okay, because, again, we have a program going on right now to go in that direction. We're working with the state on it. It's in collaboration with the schools. I mean, that's a big piece of it. We need to work together.
Correct.
And we don't want to overlap services where you have a program going on and we're doing a program with the state. We just want to make sure we're in sync with each other. So definitely look forward to updates on what you guys are doing there. In fact, the superintendent recommended this consultant to do this study. And it was supposed to have it over 6 weeks ago, a month ago, but, you know, things take time in government. So I heard the report is finalized and we should be getting a copy of it. So I'm excited to see that. And again, the overall equipment and getting a 21st century school, I'm all for it. I think it's great, and I think it's the right thing to do. And so I'm excited to see the school. I went to school there, so probably hasn't changed too much. So
it has not.
Thank you.
Okay, so just real quick, council. This Saturday's the 9th, and the following Saturday's the 16th, 23rd, the 30th, and then into November it's the 6th, the 13th, or the 20th. Any? Don't
have my calendar with me.
You don't have it? Okay. All right. Well, we'll shoot some dates with email, I guess, and we'll go from there, and then we'll get with you guys and figure out what date that is, and we'll get Wendy. Wendy will advertise.
You can specify a date.
Yeah. Barbara doesn't have her calendar, so she can't commit, and I know it's kind of last minute or last second, so that's really not fair. But I was trying to push it a little bit.
If you could keep in mind too, just we're targeting the 25th of October for another workshop with the town council, so I think it would make sense to try to get that done in advance. We haven't put the request in yet, but
I like sooner the better. So
yeah,
this weekend or next weekend.
Okay. Is the 25th?
It's a Monday.
Right, but that's not a council meeting. It's the 18th. Oh, okay. So what are you looking for time frame wise, Charlie? Because maybe we can do it an hour before the meeting instead of having another meeting.
Yeah.
If we're doing Mondays and Saturdays, I don't want to wear these guys out. They just can't keep up sometimes. I'm just kidding.
I'll get back to you on that. We'll put that in. See what kind of time we need.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. All right. So if we can get together and start figuring out some dates, some Saturday morning, I'd probably block out about 4 hours. Is it possible to maybe, I don't know, travel together or not together? Probably not together would be the thing.
We have a police van.
Well,
community police van that we can use.
I don't want to, when that thing comes up for replacement in 15 years, I probably won't be here.
We have a senior center van.
What's that?
We have a senior center bus and we have a police van.
I don't trust Chris Johnson's driving, but that's another story.
So we have plenty of transportation.
Okay, thank you so much. All right.
We did this before.
We did.
A couple years ago.
We did with the ball fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, Charlie, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
We appreciate the update.
Thanks, Charlie.
Okay.
Motion to act as Board of License Commission.
Second?
Motion and a second to act as the Board of License Commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, acting as the Board of License Commission, number 6, applications received from the following named persons, firms, or corporations for renewal of alcoholic beverage licenses for the 2021-2022 licensing year. This requires advertising for a public hearing to be held on November 1st, 2021.
Motion to receive said applications and advertise for public hearing to be held on November 1st, 2021.
Second?
We have a motion to second to receive and advertise for a public hearing to be held on November 1st, 2021. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Toronto?
Do they fill out a new application?
Yes.
They do.
I believe they're required to.
Do we have anything in there on litter control by any chance? Maintenance of litter, nip bottles?
There's an ordinance, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more of an enforcement issue.
Well, just with the liquor stores and things and making the public aware, we got nip bottles and beer cans and all that, so it's just one of the initiatives I've looked at, and just as we're applying for a new license, maybe we let them know about an ordinance that we have. I know that some of these restaurants have dumpsters, and we're talking about, you know, different, where are they putting these dumpsters? Are they cleaning these dumpsters? Just something that they're aware of the ordinances that we have. That's
So Wendy, it's kind of like when we get our tax bill, and in the tax bill, there's the, talks about the refuse and recycling program and how to go about the stickers and all that stuff, a calendar's in there. Do we provide any of that with a license as far as some of the ordinances that they need to follow, or do we just assume they know what they are?
Yeah.
I know, but that wasn't the question. The question was, do we?
We don't give them extra information about the litter or anything. I mean, if you'd like us to, we can always say, here's a reminder, and send it out with their little email. We can do that.
I think that's where he's going, where Dennis is going with it. Thank you, Tom. But I'm not sure if that's a necessity or not. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we have, you know, we do all our things with stormwater and our drinking waters and our litter and control, and we have marathons, and we do a lot of stuff to make the people aware of the changes that we've made over the years. When it comes up, I think they should have a refresher to say, hey, we have an ordinance for litter control. This is how we'd like, you know, just some guidelines. It's not, you know, a little booklet of some sort that gives them some ideas, things that they might want to take into consideration. Because personally, I've thought about going around and talking to them myself in regards to some of the things that, you know, if I see another nip bottle out there, I'm gonna like.
Are you requesting that we prepare a flyer for them?
Well, something, yeah.
So Wendy, do you have all the licensees, or liquor licensees on a group email?
I have to send it out one at a time.
You do.
Oh.
Well, that changes my opinion.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, so just something to consider, I guess, okay?
All right, I'll take that as a to-do.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, number 7, public hearing advertised, application of MR Ventures LLC, 499 East Main Road, holders of a Class BV alcoholic beverage license to transfer said license to CCE Development LLC for use at the same premises for the 2020-2021 licensing year.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion to second, open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, is there anybody here from CCE Development? Okay. Why don't you come on up and state your name and address to the record and kind of tell us what you're doing and or what your plans are. We saw some of the plans. I did have a couple of questions on first floor, second floor.
Yep. Jeff Lipshire's CCE Development, also J2 Construct in Middletown. Recently purchased a property to move our offices over there. We're a construction manager. We received zoning approval or planning approval last month for the construction of an accessory structure, which will be a kind of a storage building for us, and for some modifications to the existing building. Currently, the existing building, I'm sure a lot of you have been in there, it's just kind of an old Grange Hall, and they just kind of added a kitchen, and you know, they did a good job with the construction, but it was really just a big open space. So what, there's a lot of height in the building, so we decided to put the dormers on. We're kind of splitting the building in half and just kind of reconfiguring the space. So the restaurant side now has the first floor space and a mezzanine level that's open to the first floor. So it's got about the same square footage that it had before, and it'll have the same occupancy. Of course, we just submitted the plans for the permit for building, so that's going to go through plan review or fire plan review and building review with Chris. But the plan is to obviously work on our half first, and then we're working as a team to get the restaurant kind of finishes, kind of finalized and details, and hoping for to get that open as quickly as possible as well. I'm hoping we're going to get into our space by Christmas. So that's kind of the overall plan. In addition to shutting down one of the openings in the parking lot for kind of stopping the Indy 500 going through there every day. It's amazing what people do cutting through that parking lot.
Don't do that. I love it. No, I'm just kidding. I don't cut.
You must have been one of the guys cursing me out there the other day.
No,
we
I don't cut.
There watching.
I don't cut through there. So Jeff, I just want to make sure I understand what you're doing. So part of it's going to be a restaurant, and
Yep.
part of it's going to be a construction facility?
Part of it, so we'll have our office, our construction management office, which is some of our professional staff. So, you know, most of our staff are on job sites in the field. And so we have very few people in the office. We've got accounting staff, and, you know, I'm in and out, and a couple, and several other, you know, professional staff, so as PMs and estimators, stuff like that. But the construction managers, the project managers, the superintendents are out in the field on the job sites every day, and the carpenters and laborers, they're out in the fields every day too. So, but we do, you know, we have some equipment, and we have things like staging and materials that we bring in and out. So that's why we went ahead and got the additional structure approved. Which we went to great lengths to make look as nice as possible to fit the whole theme over there with the Grange building. So I actually think when we get that built out, it's really going to improve the whole property as a whole. So we spent a lot of time on the architecture, and I think even when we were at the planning board, they were very complimentary of the length that we went to make it fit in. So it's not going to look like, you know, there's not going to be stuff laying around. There's not going to be, you know, it's going to be a clean site, because that's what it has to be, right? It's a very visible location, which is great for us, but also means we got to be on our.
It just seems kind of a odd comment. I know it's only liquor what we're talking about tonight, but I had to ask the question because when I looked at the plan, it just seems like a very odd combination of a restaurant, liquor store, construction offices, and equipment being there.
Well, it's not a liquor store. It's a restaurant.
No, right.
And it's
restaurant with a
it's
liquor license.
It's basically a mixed-use facility, which is exactly what it was. The lower level's all offices, and the restaurant's upstairs. We're just kind of making better use of the space. There's just so much volume there.
You just want somewhere to put your equipment.
Well,
at the same location as your office.
yeah, right. Right now,
right. So let's just get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have 2 locations. We're paying rent at 2 locations.
Understood.
But the restaurant, you know, they spent a lot of money on that. It's brand new. Did I think we would keep the space initially? No. But when I went through it with Ralph and we looked at what was there, it just seemed like crazy to get rid of it. And we don't need all of it. So it's just basically the same use that's there now. We're just kind of taking a little bit more for ourselves. And,
okay.
And so.
Right. City Council, Mrs. Flynn.
Thank you. So who's running the restaurant in the space?
We're working with Frank Doyle from the Fifth Element. Obviously, they just sold their property, and he's working with us to get the final concept in place and get that up and running as you know, quickly as possible.
Evening, Council. Frank Doyle, previous owner of Fifth Element in Newport. 17 years down there in Newport. Started the business from scratch, and it was a great success, and happy to kind of start the next chapter.
It was a nice place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, we worked, you know, even before that, we were at Christie's down there on the waterfront. So 27 years in the food and beverage, you know, helping Jeff really lay out that space effectively for flow and how the customer's experience would be in that space is what I'm coming on board to help Jeff with. you know, really have a nice kind of a jewel up there on that corner. So I'm excited, to be honest with you. So any questions?
Sooner or later, they all want to come to Middletown.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have a question.
Mrs. Santos.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for closing the exit closest to Aquidneck Avenue. I've seen a few close calls that people take a shortcut from East Main to get to Aquidneck to avoid the lights and the entrance and exit of the gas station. So thank you. Thank you so much for closing that.
Yeah, I have to say that, you know, we just closed on the building in the last couple of weeks. So Friday afternoon, we were sitting there. We kind of closed off one side, and people were just going around the cones and trying to. So we closed off one side completely and left the East Main side open, but we only closed off the driveway. So we were just standing there kind of watching what was happening, and people would drive up to the cones and then drive around on the grass to drive around. Then we moved the cones forward, put more cones, and you know, it was a busy afternoon, so we had people just coming through, 3, 4, 5 at a time. They were almost bumping into each other trying to turn around. And so I think in the long term, you know, we have plans to develop the front corner, which was kind of previously there. We used some of the parking and everything that was developed, was committed to that for our accessory structure, which has taken up a little bit of the property. So when we come back with a new plan for that corner, I think one of the things that we're going to look at seriously is that cut-through aspect is really dangerous. And I think that for our staff, I'm considering a barrier arm on that end with a transponder system that will allow us to come in and out, but nobody else from the other side. Because it's just not safe. You put the speed bumps in, literally people go through that parking lot at 25, 30 miles an hour. And I have a tenant down below who is a speech therapist for little kids, you know, so it's just not safe. So I think that in addition to architecturally improving it, we want to improve the flow of it as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Councilor Logan.
So the current tenants are going to stay, I presume, that are on the basement floor?
There's, we have, my hope is that that'll be the case. As we continue to grow, if we need the space, then we'll take that over. But it's currently set up to be separate. There's 2 tenants or 3 tenants that'll be there consistently now. A couple have moved out, because I wasn't sure when we made the purchase if we were going to do that. But obviously we can use the income from it, so I'd like to keep it there. And it's a very low, you know, it's like, you know, a speech therapist or a esthetician or somebody that has like a client at a time. So there's not a lot of, you know, repeat traffic coming in for that. But everybody's also had the same comment with the traffic flow. It's just amazing how many people cut through that place. So I think we can do a better job with that. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Mrs. Flynn?
And this may be for Madam Clerk. So this transfer expires December 1st of this year.
And they've filed their other applications, so they'll be doing this license and then doing their renewal at the same time. So that's how that'll work. So once this is granted, it'll be granted with them to advertise for their public hearing for their renewal.
And I think I understand it has to be done twice. Is that a law that they couldn't do it at relatively simultaneously, even if we heard them consecutively?
Their license is only good till December 1st. So if the license that's being transferred is only good till December 1st. So if they decided that they didn't want to open until January, the other liquor license could have just expired, and then they could have applied for a new license.
Okay, just seems like extra steps, but I'm sure that that's...
It is. It's a lot.
It is, okay. Thank you.
Just it seems like everything, there's a couple extra steps than more than what you want, but I guess you got to play by the rules. So.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Is there anyone here that'd like to, it's a public hearing. Is anyone like to speak on this item? Any further councilors have any questions? Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
Motion is second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And good luck to you.
Thank you.
Motion to grant said license and advertise for public hearing for renewal.
Second?
Motion is second to grant said license and advertise for public hearing for renewal. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion to reconvene as town council.
Second?
Motion is second to reconvene as the council. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar. I know Council Flynn wants to remove item number 8. Any other councilors like to take off any other consent items?
Motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of number 8.
Second?
Motion is second to approve minus number 8. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, number 8, memorandum of finance director in reference to American Rescue Plan, ARPA update.
Motion to receive said memorandum and approve updated schedule.
Second?
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Mrs. Flynn.
Thank you. And I think I saw Mark is here, and I don't, he may not be prepared, and I totally understand, but I noticed that this is a schedule of what's coming up, and I'm just wondering if you could share with the public sort of an overview of what this is, how they're involved, because there are public hearings for the public to weigh in on this November 1st and December 6th, with a deadline to receive public project ideas December 17th, which is coming right up. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to give an overview and encourage people to come out and participate, if you don't mind.
This whole thing is part of the American plan that the government has passed, the federal government. They have awarded Middletown $4.7 million, and part of the plan is to get public input. So we have developed this plan to have public provide projects that they'd like us to spend the money on, and according to that timeline, and then those projects will come to the council, and then that'll go to the planning board to make sure that it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan, and then it will come back to the council for their approval as to what projects that we're doing. So we are definitely looking for public input. We already have received some. It's been out there. There's information on the website, and the information person has put them out there.
And if somebody had ideas, they wanted to get some information as to if those ideas qualified or were appropriate, where would they go?
There's on the website, you can apply, you can put in whatever project you want. We also have forms in town hall that they can just stop by and fill them out and hand them in.
And that's middletownri.com?
Correct.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to licenses. Application of CCE Development, LLC, 499 East Main Road, for a victualling house license for the 2020-2021 licensing year. This is new.
Motion to grant said license subject to the building inspector, fire marshal, and board of health approvals.
Second?
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Number 13, application of Verge Mobile, LLC DBA T-Mobile, 1364 West Main Road, for a holiday sales license for the 2021-2022 licensing year. This is new.
Motion to grant said license.
Second?
There a motion is second to grant. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Number 14, application of Jim's Pizza, LLC, DBA Pizonis, 876 West Main Road, for a victualling house license for the 2020-2021 licensing year. This is new.
Motion to grant said license subject to building inspector, fire marshal, and board of health approvals.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Are there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, let's move on to public hearings. Number 15, continued from September 7th, 2021 of the regular meeting. Public hearing's been advertised. Public hearing remains open. In ordinance of the Town of Middletown, this is the second reading. An ordinance amendment to the Town Code of the Town of Middletown, Title 15 Land Use, Chapter 152 Zoning Code, is amended by adding new Section 727 marijuana-related uses. The Planning Board recommendation is on file.
Public hearing remains open.
Second?
Okay, so the public hearing is open, and is there anyone that would like to speak on this item? Just before we do that, I'm sorry. Peter, will you just give a recap? Because I know Council Flynn asked last time if there was, we got into discussion about if we do not put something in place zoning-wise, it's ordinance-wise, then that could open us up to, if the state does pass recreational marijuana, I believe, then the zoning would be pretty much wide open. So could you just explain that again and explain what Council Flynn asked? And I know you sent the late update this afternoon.
Yep. So,
but
let me explain where we were and then the proposed revisions that I sent in. So under the draft of the ordinance that was sent in by the planning board, it recommended prohibiting compassion centers and retail marijuana stores in the event that retail was legalized at some point. It did allow personal cultivation under the Medical Marijuana Act, which is what the state law requires. And then it also allowed, in very limited areas and with a whole list of conditions, commercial cultivation and testing facilities, provided there was a special use permit from the zoning board. And the cultivation was limited to the industrial zone, the testing facilities limited to the office park. Based on the feedback from the council at the last public hearing, that they would prefer to see those uses, commercial cultivation and testing facilities, also prohibited, I made some revisions, proposed revisions to the ordinance, and essentially what those say, and I'm going to just read the first one with regard to cultivation. What it now says is marijuana cultivation centers are prohibited in all zoning districts, provided, however, in the event it is determined that the town council lacks the authority to prohibit marijuana cultivation centers in Middletown, marijuana cultivation centers shall be permitted in the light industrial and light industrial traffic sensitive zoning districts upon the grant of a special use permit as hereinafter set forth. So this redraft prohibits those commercial cultivation centers as well as testing facilities, but has a backup provision that says in the event that it's determined that the council doesn't have the ability or the right to prohibit those uses in town, then the provisions limiting it to those two zoning districts and requiring a special use permit and all the conditions that were set forth in there by the planning board would then apply. So it puts us in a position where if it's determined at some point by the court or a General Assembly that we don't have the authority to prohibit those uses, at least we have that backup provision in there, limiting where they can go, requiring zoning approval and requiring all the conditions that were put in there and by the planning board.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Mrs. Flynn.
Could I ask Madam Clerk to put up on the screen the page 15, the uses table that I emailed earlier today? And this is the next one down, the next page. And if I could just get confirmation, Mr. Regan, that, oops. So this is the uses table that was in the draft that we received.
Can we put it the other way, where it was larger, so we can see, or no? Because all I can, there we go. Thank you.
So and correct me, just to double check here, Peter, the green up on the screen, that is by state law. Those have to be allowed by right.
Yes.
Okay. The pink now, which are those special use permits, those will be.
Well, the residential cooperation, the residential cooperative cultivation is also something that we can't prohibit under the current state law.
So the larger, taller pinks, those are also by state law. They have to be special use?
Well, I don't know what you mean by the larger, taller pinks,
well,
but okay.
There's one row.
Yeah, but so let me just say, because I didn't have the ability to revise the chart. So if these revisions that I have proposed are accepted by the council, then the the two pink squares for marijuana cultivation centers, where it says S, that would become an N, and then the pink square for marijuana testing provider would go from an S to an N as well. Okay.
And what about the non-residential cooperative cultivation? Would that also change to an N?
He just said
No.
yes.
No.
It would not?
No.
And it's,
That is the small scale where you have a couple of
two
card
people.
holders that
Right.
are engaging in that small scale cultivation. But
the non-residential cooperative cultivation?
yes, that's also small scale versus cultivation centers, which is what you would consider the larger scale commercial cultivation.
So the non-residential cooperative cultivation and the residential cooperative cultivation are by state law special use permits? They are allowed with a special use permit by state law?
Well, they're allowed by state law. What the planning board, after, once again, a lot of review, put those in as special use permit uses. We don't have the ability to prohibit those.
Oh. Okay.
So there's a distinction between the small scale cultivation, which would be the residential and non-residential cooperative cultivation, in addition to patient and caregiver cultivation, versus cultivation centers, which would be larger scale commercial operations, which is what the topic of discussion was last week. So that's where the focus was.
So there's only the 3 outlier special use permit areas that will change to prohibited unless we are told by the state that we can't prohibit them. Is that
what is proposed here, which was based on the direction from the council at the last meeting, was to prohibit testing providers as well as cultivation centers. So it will be those 2 items that would go from special use to prohibited.
And the other ones we cannot prohibit?
That is my reading of the regulations and the statute. Lori may have a different opinion apparently, but I don't.
Yeah, because my concern stands that the special use permit, which is approved by the zoning board with the current findings, I don't think we're prepared for these uses. You know, the word marijuana is not in our comprehensive plan at all. And most of the findings have to do with the impact or negative impact, excuse me, of property values, quality of life, appropriate property use, or hazardous conditions. And I'm not sure with this brand new marijuana industry, these uses, I'm not sure that we're prepared to assess that, we, the zoning board, or any zoning board in our state.
So that's a great point you bring up. So Peter, what would have to happen? Would we have to have a review of the comprehensive community plan? If it's not mentioned in there at all, how can you have an assessment on it? Or make a determination if it's you know, in line with the plan or not in line with the plan if it's not mentioned in it at all? I mean, what the state law would say if somebody challenged that, say, wait a minute,
Well,
time out.
if the state law allows it, then the state law allows it. You know, the state law says we have to provide patient cultivation. We have to provide it regardless of what our comprehensive plan says, one way or the other.
So why have a plan if the state's going to tell us what we can and cannot have?
Well, because there are certain areas that the state has
build the wall,
has overruled or has preempted, and
bridges,
given us less latitude in which to legislate locally.
So Peter, we are allowing cultivation, patient cultivation and caregiver cultivation. Those are allowed by right in the green rows. You're saying that the non-residential cooperative cultivation and the residential cooperative cultivation also cannot be prohibited, although it is prohibited in some.
I didn't specifically look at that because that was not a point of discussion at the last meeting, and that's not something that you guys directed me to change. You directed me to change the cultivation centers and the testing facility.
Well, there may have been some confusion. I think the conversation was to be as conservative as possible as we are embarking on something that there's no precedent for.
Okay. Lori, what do you have to add? Why don't you just come up, your name and address for the record, please?
Lori Verderosa, 426 Third Beach Road. All I was going to add to what Peter said is we can't change that because the non-residential cooperative cultivation and the residential cooperative cultivation pertain to medical marijuana. Correct. That is in the law. We cannot prohibit the cultivation of medical marijuana. That's the difference there.
Okay. Thank you, Laurie. Okay. Did you have your question answered, Mrs. Flynn?
On the uses, yes. I do have additional comment, but I
Okay,
don't want to...
go right ahead.
You sure?
Mhm.
So Madam Clerk, if you could scroll back to the first page of this email, of this attachment. So this was the other issue that was brought up. Yeah, you may want to, if you can, enlarge it. These were locations and distances that the marijuana cultivation centers and the marijuana testing providers, and I know that now, although we have prohibited the testing providers in the last area, if we are not allowed to do that, the language will now say, okay, you have to have that one special use zone in the office park. So the issue was the disconnect of the distances from these particular activities. Can that be enlarged at all, who's ever running the screens, to see the yellow highlighted part a little bit better?
There you go.
Yeah, there, perfect.
Thank you.
So you notice in the, it's paragraph C, location, and there's a number 1 and a number 2. Number 1 is the marijuana cultivation centers, and number 2 is the testing providers. The issue was, in item 1C, you'll notice it says 1,000 feet of the nearest school, public or private. So you're protecting our Middletown youth and children, and yet in A and B of item number 1, you reduce it to 100 feet and 200 feet respectively. But those are still areas where children aren't prohibited. There are going to be children or youth in residential zoning districts or in houses of worship, parks, playgrounds, playfields, youth centers, licensed daycare centers, or other locations where groups of minors regularly congregate. It was a disconnect and inconsistent to have it 1,000 feet from school and not 1,000 feet from all these other places where youth or children are not prohibited. They could be there.
But I think the solicitor said last time, Terry, was that if we put that in there, then basically you're prohibiting it, and that the state wouldn't look on that as favorably.
So if I could just follow up on that.
Sure.
The planning board and the planning department spent a good deal of time on the mapping. I don't know, Ron's here, but I can't remember how many versions of the map, but it was a lot. It went through different distances, and to make those distances consistent, it blanks out the entire map. There is no spot available for those uses. So if the state says we cannot prohibit the uses, which is why we now with this redraft have this backup provision to limit the areas, you have to have some place to put them. You just can't say, well, they're allowed, but as a practical matter, we're not leaving any space for them to operate. That's a de facto prohibition, and if the prohibition is prohibited, then what you've got there as your backup provision to try to control the location and time and operation and other things now becomes invalid, and you're not protected. And now you're basically wide open. Now you can be anywhere. So that's the reason why those distances are what they are. Because if you make them all 1,000 feet or 500 or 600 feet, then there's no space left on the map.
And I think we understood that last time, and I think the conversation...
And just to follow up, I don't mean to interrupt, but if you leave no space on the map, then you leave yourself in a bad spot, because what you've done is the state says, okay, you can't prohibit it. You've de facto prohibited it, and that any of those provisions you have in there regarding where it can go, how it can operate, all the provisions in there with regard to security, et cetera, those are gone. It's not valid, and you've left yourself in a spot where you don't really have anything of value in the ordinance protected, so.
And so I guess the point at the last public hearing was, you know, to be more conservative if at all possible. And so what if there's no place for these uses to exist unless it does put Middletown at risk? So my question is, the way that you have done these edits on the uses, could you not equalize the distance of the marijuana cultivation centers and the marijuana testing providers for each of those areas and make them, you know, again, for the cultivation centers, everybody's protected, all youth be 1,000 feet away, and for the testing providers be 200 feet away, but then say, you know, like you did with this one, if the state, you know, would find that in violation, then it goes back to...
For the reasons I've suggested, you already have a provision saying it's prohibited.
So let me ask you...
You already have a backup provision. If your backup provision can't be, it's still prohibited, and now you're going to a third provision, that's not gonna protect the town. Okay, you've already stated in the ordinance that use is prohibited. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but
so,
if you need to have a backup provision to prevent it from being wide open, in the event the state says, no, you're not allowed to prohibit it, or in order to prohibit, you have to go out to a referendum, you need to have that backup provision be actually valid. And what you're suggesting would render it invalid. And once again, leave the town vulnerable.
Well, I think we're leaving our youth and children vulnerable, just from what I can see. And again, I'm not a lawyer,
I'm not
so...
suggesting from a policy standpoint that we ought to have these businesses here. What I'm suggesting is from a legal standpoint, if you want to protect the youth, and you don't have the ability to prohibit it, then you need to be able to control it and limit it to the extent that you can legally. And prohibiting it and limiting it illegally doesn't do you any good. So.
And it would be illegal to equitably, in all districts, keep those maximum distances. Is that what you're saying?
If I'm reading this correctly, Peter, hang on one second, please, because we can go on and on and on about this. So, and you still probably respectfully disagree, right? Because I understand where you're going.
I just want to make sure that
understand,
it's clear
but what I'm...
This is our only course of action.
Understood. The way I'm looking at it is the planning board did their due diligence to maximize the protection based on the cultivation centers and where they're allowed, and the testing center, which is in the industrial park, right? So I think they're doing that to maximize under the legality of it, the space. You can't go 1,000 feet in where the marijuana testing providers would be in the office park, because then you'd be prohibiting it. So that's maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's probably what they looked at, I would guess, to maximize without crossing that law, breaking that law. So that's why I think the disparity between 1,000 feet and 200 feet, because way out in West Main Road, the closest school is
JFK?
high school, I guess, right? Or is Oliphant School still considered a school based on the regional special ed that's there? Did we look at that? Just offices? Okay. Well, the third floor is used for regional special ed, so. Just the offices. Okay. 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 Thank you for stepping up, Mr. Wolanski, and clearing this up,
When
sir.
the planning board was looking at the setbacks, they did consider Oliphant School as a school, so it was part of the mapping is to
Still 1,000 feet.
apply the buffers to that school.
Okay.
To that building.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else in the audience like, yes, ma'am?
Carol Formica, 21 Mass Court. I hate public speaking, but
You
I'm
do
here.
just fine at it, Carol. Don't even worry about it. You're just fine at
I
it.
do, but this is how passionate I am about this
I
subject.
understand.
First, I want to thank you all for considering the amendment to the ordinance. I do appreciate that. And I do want to say a special thank you to Ms. Flynn for being a champion for our youth. I've written many, many times about the detrimental impacts of marijuana legalization and commercialization, and they involve the environment, indoor marijuana cultivation hazards, including first responders, impaired driving, workplace safety, unintentional pediatric exposures, and increased youth use, which also includes addiction and suicide. I put in a lot of time and effort into educating myself and hopefully the public on the detrimental effects of marijuana legalization and commercialization. Over the span of 10 years, I have served as a volunteer for the Middletown Prevention Coalition, and I specifically point out the middle word of that coalition. It's Middletown Prevention Coalition, not Middletown Reaction Coalition, not Middletown Correction Coalition. I have attended community forums, I have testified at local and state hearings, I have served on the State Legislative Study Commission, and I have done extensive research on the societal impacts of marijuana use, as well as legalization and commercialization. So tonight, I'm going to look at this issue through a different lens, one that involves an economic viewpoint. A cost-benefit analysis that was conducted by the Centennial Institute of Colorado Christian University in 2018 found that for every $1 gained in tax revenue, Coloradans spent $4.50 to mitigate the effects of legalization. So again, for every $1 spent, $4.50 was spent to mitigate the effects. If we're going to talk about ROI, or return on investment, in terms of spending and costs, is this town council, in conjunction with this ordinance, proposing that Middletown taxpayers will gain $1 in tax revenue from marijuana-related businesses and get a negative ROI of $3.50? For the business people on the council, my question to you is that what you consider a sound business investment for the Middletown community? And I also have two questions for two counselors, if that is okay if I ask those questions, Mr. President.
It depends what those questions are, Carol.
Okay. The first one is for Councilor Von Vilas. As a longtime educator, what is your opinion on the legalization and commercialization of marijuana in Middletown in regards to youth use and education?
Personally, I don't support it, but that does not mean that I do not go by what the town wants, what the council wants, what we agree as a council.
Okay, thank you for answering that. And my other question is for Mr. Vice President. As a retired firefighter, what are your concerns about the legalization, commercialization of marijuana in Middletown and the potential response the Middletown Fire Department may have to take in an emergency involving an indoor marijuana cultivation?
Wow, you could have called me earlier and given me a little time for that.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. All right, so as a firefighter, and I do have, as you know, Tommy's on Middletown and Ben's on Newport, so it definitely hits home. So purely from a tactical standpoint, there's breathing apparatus and they're well trained, so as far as going into a testing facility, I would hope that they would follow their protocols. From the standpoint of marijuana in general, I would love to say, as we talked about the last meeting, to prohibit it altogether. And I think, although I don't particularly care all the time for the lawyer mumbo jumbo speak, I think that Peter is doing the best job that he can under the circumstances, because we can't choose our own hand here. If the state jams it down our throat, then we at least have to have a backup. And I would love to sit here and say, no, absolutely, I don't care, but we would look pretty silly if we didn't leave us at least some way out. So I mean, other than fighting the state somehow, and I don't even know how that would go, I have to say this is the best I've heard so far. And thank you for all your
all your time. I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't fall on deaf ears.
Right, Carol, it doesn't. And you've been an advocate against this for a long time, every time it's come up, and, you know, and so, and I understand the research you've done and the facts, and it wouldn't be okay with the council for a return on investment like that. We're just trying to do the best we can based on state law. We're trying to prohibit it the best we can with what we can do legally. And I think by putting potentially another layer on it, whether we all agree with it or disagree with it, I think it's better to control what we can control by putting an ordinance in place versus not having one, and what that could look like based on state law. So I think I'm going to support this because I think in the amendment, because I think it's the right thing to do, and at least we'd have something in place. You know, so it wouldn't be all over the, you know, it wouldn't be wide open to the town of Middletown at that point if we did.
Thank you for considering the more conservative approach.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, and you do just fine public speaking.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else like to speak on this? Any further questions or comments or concerns of any councilors? Mrs. Flynn?
No, I just want to also thank Peter Regan for,
Yeah.
you know, coming up with the solution to look into verbiage that would give us that more conservative approach, but also be ready to go as part of it in case the state said, you can't do that. So, yeah, I do appreciate it. I just wanted to confirm that this was the best that we could possibly do, and our hands are tied. We've done all that we possibly
Yeah,
could.
and thank you for your suggestion on the other layer too, as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Having said that, Mr. Vice President.
Okay, motion to amend the proposed ordinance as follows. I'm supposed to read all this?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Sit back in your chairs. Amending the table of contents, beginning with 727C to 727L as follows. 727C is use regulation, special use permit required. 727D is patient cultivation. E is caregiver cultivation. F is residential cooperative cultivation. G is non-residential cooperative cultivation. H is enforcement. I is severability. Amending Section A, legislative findings and intent. In Section 9, to remove the word "and" after the word "centers" and add after the word "stores" marijuana cultivation centers and marijuana testing facilities. Amending Section A, legislative findings and intent at the beginning of Section 10, in the event it is determined that the town council lacks the authority to prohibit marijuana-related businesses in Middletown, ensuring, and by adding after the word properly the word "located." Amending Section C, use regulations, special use permit required, in Section 2 to add after the word "centers," in quotes, "are prohibited in all zoning districts, provided, however, in the event it is determined that the town council lacks the authority to provide marijuana cultivation centers in Middletown, marijuana cultivation centers shall be," and remove the word "are," and add the word "permit" as hereafter set forth. Amending Section C, use regulations, special use permit required. In Section 3, add after the word "providers," "are prohibited in all zoning districts, provided, however, in the event it is determined that the town council lacks the authority to prohibit marijuana testing providers in Middletown, marijuana testing providers shall be," and remove the word "are" and add the word "permit" as hereafter set forth. Amending Section C, use regulations, special permit required. In Section 4, to add before the word "special," in the event it's determined that the town council lacks the authority to prohibit marijuana cultivation centers in Middletown, comma, A. Amending by adding Section I, severability, if any provision of this ordinance or application thereof to any person or circumstances is held unconstitutional, illegal, or otherwise invalid, the remaining provisions of the article and the application of such provisions to other persons or circumstances other than those to which it is held invalid shall not be affected thereby. It's like a Monty
And
Python.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just add 2 additions to that. First would be in section 602, the table of uses, making marijuana cultivation centers and marijuana testing providers prohibited in all districts, and in subsection C, subsection 4, after the word centers, adding the words or marijuana testing providers.
So moved.
What he said.
We need a second.
Second.
We have a second. Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing.
And nope, we got to vote on that first. Okay. So.
Good job.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further public comment? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, Mr. Vice President.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion is second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adopt said ordinance on its second reading as amended.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adopt said ordinance in its second reading as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you.
Motion to
Okay.
recess.
Second.
Nice.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll take a 10-minute recess. Thank you.
What's that? I sent it to you today.
Okay.
Motion to reconvene.
Second?
We have a motion, second, reconvene, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's move on to number 16, public hearing advertised, an ordinance of the town of Middletown, first reading. An ordinance in the town, an ordinance, an amendment to the town code of the town of Middletown, Title 15, land use, Chapter 152 zoning code is amending Section 440 entitled definitions, Section 602 entitled scheduled of district regulations, uses and districts, in Section 703 entitled accessory uses and structures, Section 725 entitled ground-mounted solar photovoltaic, I think.
Bravo.
I don't think I have it right. Installation. Planning board recommendation is on file.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion to second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we have a public hearing. Ron, if you want to make your presentation on what's going on here and what we're attempting to put in place and why, that'd be fantastic.
Yes, thank you. Ron Wolanski, Town Planner. Just a brief PowerPoint presentation just to summarize and introduce you to what's being proposed. So the planning board's been working on this for quite a while, actually. It's an area that's identified in the comprehensive plan, trying to promote use of alternative energy and trying to improve the town's regulations related to alternative energy, in this case specifically solar panels. Within the comp plan, I'll just direct your attention to the last action item on the slide. Review town regulations and proposed amendments as needed to allow for installation of renewable energy technology in appropriate locations in town, taking into consideration potential impacts on the community and the town's scenic, cultural, and natural resources. So that language really guided the planning board in its work in drafting what you have before you tonight, is trying to balance providing for alternative energy while also protecting community character, particularly in residential areas. So under the current regulations, and there is a very brief section within the current zoning ordinance related to solar panels, and it has some minimal regulation, including maximum height limits, setbacks, 25% lot coverage in residential areas, and requiring development plan review for larger facilities. But it was felt that, and the planning board really believes that current regulation is not sufficient to protect the town, and also doesn't do one thing that came up specifically of wanting to consider allowing solar carports, and there's a picture of what we're talking about on the screen. In a residential situation where carports can be built, can be built with solar panels on the roof to provide for energy production. I'm just going to back up one slide just so have you look at this picture before I move on. Talking about solar carports, in this photo you can see a more of a commercial application of that technology, and these are being built more and more. Bristol Community College in Massachusetts has these, as well as some other institutional operations. So as we get further into the discussion, we're talking about commercial application of the solar carport idea. This is more of what we're talking about. So under the proposed amendments, it would amend, as the president just read, 4 sections of the zoning code. I want to, make, in the second bullet, make clear that this addresses ground-mounted solar only. It does not address roof-mounted solar. Currently, under town procedures, any roof-mounted solar, whether it be residential or commercial, is considered an accessory use and is typically permitted without any additional permitting through zoning for those solar panels, and that would continue to allow those roof-mounted accessory uses. So this ordinance would only address ground-mounted solar panels. It identifies or provides for a designation between small and large facilities at 1,000-foot square foot threshold. And that will come into play in the residential areas. With the next bullet, only the small scale solar, and that would be, again, 1,000 square feet or less, would be allowed in residential situations. And in residential districts, they could only be developed as an accessory to the principal residential use. You probably have heard or read in the news about facilities being proposed or built in other parts of the state where there's large commercial scale solar facilities being applied for or built in on farmland or in forested areas. It's created a lot of controversy on the west side of the bay, and that's something that the planning board wanted to ensure that they addressed in this ordinance. So, and most of those areas, particularly in Middletown, are in our residentially zoned areas. So the planning board felt that it was best to have that limitation so that in residential areas, there's a limitation on the size, 1,000 square feet, and that they must be an accessory to the principal residential use. So that's part of the proposal. Development plan review would still be required for any larger scale development, so anything over 1,000 square feet, which would only be in those commercial districts, would go through the development plan review process. And there would be dimensional regulations, landscaping requirements, site design, and all of those things. So specifically, the sections that would be amended, section 400 under definitions would define the uses. Section 602, which is the use table, would identify where those uses would be, or where the facilities would be allowed. So again, in residential areas, it's only the small facilities that would be allowed. In commercial areas, small or large facilities would be permitted by special use permit. So in either case, whether it's residential or commercial, a special use permit would be required. There are some modifications to section 703 regarding accessory uses, again, in structures, again, dealing with the carports and ensuring that they would be allowed to be constructed in appropriate locations on the site. And then in section 725, which is the current section in the zoning ordinance addressing ground-mounted solar, that would be completely replaced by the text that you have in front of you tonight. This slide just summarizes some of the provisions. Again, there's the height restrictions, 12 feet for ground-mounted, and then for carport solar, they would be regulated by the height limitations for accessory structures depending on the district that they're located. And those provisions are within section 603 and 604 of the zoning ordinance. There would be setbacks, again, consistent with accessory or principal buildings depending on the location, and then lot coverage. Currently, we have a 50% developable land area limit in commercial areas. Or actually currently it's town-wide. Under the proposed, it would be 50% in commercial areas, and then in residential zones for ground-mounted, it would be a limit of 25% of lot area, developable land area, and residential carports would be limited to 10%. And I would just point out that on that lot coverage item, because in residential districts, the facilities are limited to 1,000 square feet, it's unlikely that they're going to get up to those percentages anyway. It's going to be restricted by the square footage limit. So just very quickly, I'll get through this. In residential zones, small systems, as I said, are allowed by special use permit, including carports. Development plan review for large systems. Landscaping and screening would be required. In terms of site design, electrical lines would have to be installed underground. I know that we've got at least one facility in town where that didn't happen, and having the above ground lines are not attractive, so that would be required, that the lines serving the facilities would have to be installed underground. Soil preservation, again, particularly in areas where agricultural use might expect to happen in the future, that topsoil has to be maintained. But again, since most of the agricultural areas are zoned residential and there's those other limitations, the 1,000 square foot limitation, there wouldn't be as much concern for the loss of topsoil on agricultural land. And that's a very quick summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So, yes, Mrs. Santos.
Thank you, sir. Ron, I'm looking at the photograph that has the two automobiles under this carport, okay? Above it are the solar panels, correct?
Correct.
Where does the rain run to when it rains? Where does it go, on top of the cars? There's no gutters there, right?
I don't know about that particular structure, but there could be gutters. If the panels are set so that they're abutting, there could be gutters at the edge of the panels, sure.
But none is shown on this photo.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that construction is.
Could be on the house side.
So what you're saying, it's not required, I think, is where she's going.
Well, you look at this, there's no gutter, so where does the water?
Don't stand under it.
Goes
Thank
toward
you.
the front of the car.
You're welcome.
They're not next to each other.
Was there any runoff considerations taken? I think that's what she's getting at as far as those types of structures or anything like that. You know, when we create things, it's, you know, zero runoff, and so, but this is a structure, so it's probably different and different requirements.
Yeah, so for any project, whether it's the carports or the ground-mounted facilities, they would have to go through the review process, technical review committee. Stormwater management is a requirement. Our town engineer is currently working on the revised state standards. The state has just put out new guidelines for how to treat solar facilities in terms of runoff control. That would all be reviewed as part of the development plan review process to ensure that there weren't any adverse impacts.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Ron, would a, say, like a bigger solar farm, a commercial area like on West Main Road, what they did out there, would that have to meet any type of commercial design standard? Is that tied together at all with our commercial design standards, or no?
Not beyond what's in this draft ordinance.
Should it be, maybe? I don't know.
Well, most of what's in our commercial development design standards are for buildings.
Understood, but these are different type of structures.
Right, right. So there's the limitations on height, there's requirements for screening. In terms of the, I guess, a design standard for the actual structures, there's nothing in the proposed ordinance to do that.
The one thing I would say that would be different if that was coming into this ordinance is that line of telephone poles that provide the wires to that facility would not have been allowed.
Okay.
So that is one of the key elements of this proposal, is that any of the wires servicing these facilities have to be buried.
Right.
And then, as Ron mentioned, screening, so that you're not looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not looking at the facility, and you don't have a line of poles coming from in what was otherwise an agricultural field. So.
Just setback wise, like say I lived on Vanasek Avenue, or anywhere commercial that could potentially house a commercial solar field. Is that accurate where it says, is it 25 feet? Or 50 feet? I mean, what's a setback for that commercial? Or am I just looking at residential?
If you're looking at the presentation, that's unfortunately an earlier version of the presentation that you have in your packet. The actual ordinance, you'll see it references the standards in the zoning ordinance. So depending on the zoning district that you're in, that'll dictate what the setbacks are. In that area, that's a general business zoning district. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the setback would be.
Okay.
On Vanasek, but it would be tied.
Or any neighborhood like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, in Wapping Road, it's I mean, that whole, when Vanasek sold to, I think it was Van Buren or whoever purchased that group, you know, could that potentially be someday a solar field? I don't know. Who knows? Maybe not, but I just want to make sure that we have something in place, because this reminds me a lot of the other alternative energy when the windmills first came out and we didn't have regulations and we started scrambling because you could pop them up in your backyard if you wanted to.
Right.
And so this is kind of similar in principle. little bit different structures, obviously, but.
One of the key provisions here, as Ron mentioned, is the fact that in a residential district, say for example that land on Wapping Road, you're limited to 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
To a large facility would have to go in one of the commercial zones. And in terms of setbacks and screening, as you know, where we have commercial uses backing up against residential uses, that's where we have the most robust screening that's required under the ordinances. So.
Yeah. And I would suggest too, even though there would be setbacks contained in the zoning ordinance, these projects, again, in the commercial areas, the larger projects are going to have to go through the public hearing process, special use permit, development plan review. That would be an opportunity for the boards, planning board and zoning board, in particular situations, if concerns are raised about maybe there's a residential abutter right up against that commercial property, that would be an opportunity for the boards to impose or request wider setbacks in those locations.
Yeah, it would only make sense, really, you know, so that's why I was asking. What was it on agricultural land you were talking about having to maintain topsoil? What does that mean?
If you had to do some grading to install the facility, and actually it really discourages any grading at all, you're supposed to keep the existing grades and basically just have the panels follow the grade of the land. But if you had to do any grading where you had to strip some of the topsoil, you're required to save it on site. You know, you pile it, plant it, so it's there. So when the facility is decommissioned, you can spread that soil back out again.
Okay. Does any council have any further questions of Ron, Mrs. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I always get concerned with residential properties, and you know, somebody wants to put in their 1,000-foot ground-mounted solar panel to drive their home, but they don't have that much room to play with, and they want to push it to the edge of the property towards their neighbors, and they go for relief. I mean, is that something that, you know, what are the criteria is going to be with solar panels? Because I think that they can be annoying if they're reflective, or, you know, I don't know what it's like the windmills, you know, the unintended consequences, and, you know, how free is, you know, the zoning board, for example, to allow, you know, relief and variance requests, and you know, where will that put us, or can there be no discretion? Like, this is solar panels. We do not want them encroaching any closer than here.
You wouldn't
Well,
do that.
we do have the standards that are in the ordinance, but I get your question, and you know, Peter can answer probably better than I can, but you have to allow for that opportunity for someone to seek relief, and it's the same findings that have to be made as for any other application for a variance. I don't know that there's an opportunity to require higher standards for variances for this particular use.
No, I mean, a dimensional variance is a dimensional variance, so whether it's a lot coverage or variance for a, you know, a garage or a pool or a solar array, it would be the same standards that would apply. I suppose, you know, if it's something that's less common amenity, like different than a garage or something of that sort, then it might be a little bit of a higher burden as a practical matter to show that, you know, that you meet the required hardship. But yeah, the people would always have the right to seek a variance from the board.
Okay, it just concerns me because it's very subjective. Hardship, you know what? Hardship might be you're having your 5th child, you need to add a room, or a hardship is, you know, we need a pool because you can't sell the house without a pool.
Well, after my time on the zoning board, I figured out after I was off of it, really, who's the hardship on? Is it on the applicant, or is it on the neighbor? So anyway, Mrs. Vaughn.
I was just going to say, if your question had to deal with a residence, you're talking about a residence. I have solar, and I will tell you, they put it on the roof. All right, they don't put it on the ground; they put it on the roof.
Well, this is for ground. Like, you'd have the option.
I know, but I thought you asked the question about residence. I thought that was what you were talking about.
Yeah, but this could be. It could be in a residential area too, on the ground.
They wouldn't do that. They don't do that.
It doesn't really do it.
They do. My neighbor across my mother's did it.
On the ground?
On the ground.
Post in the ground, they
Yeah.
put a big panel
You're
that
kidding
can.
me.
No.
No, I wouldn't kid you.
New Hampshire, they do it all. I want. Yeah.
That is what this is specifically for, right? Ground mounted in
Oh, yeah, I've seen
residential
it.
and in commercial, yeah.
One on Greenette.
Yeah.
Big one on Greenette.
Yeah. I mean, they did a nice job. I mean, it was
Oh.
just, it was way before he was way ahead of his time. He did a nice job with it. You can't see it, but
Yeah.
it could be in anybody's yard, and that's the concern
But
next to,
I don't think they do that now. They put it on the roof.
well, they're allowed to do it.
There
before.
are, it's certainly not as common, but there are individual ground-mounted facilities that I've seen go in. But right now, we don't have anything that limits or regulates that, and so that's
Right.
the idea behind this is to give us the ability to avoid situations that you wouldn't want to see,
Correct.
particularly in the residential zones.
Correct.
I can't imagine why anybody would want it.
Well, you would want it. I want to do it, and the reason that you would do it is so that you're not affixing it to the roof of your building.
Right.
So if there's any maintenance, it's on the ground. You're not,
Right.
I mean, if you got a new roof, great, but if you don't,
Well, yeah, you need a good roof.
yeah.
Okay. So it is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this particular issue? Any councilors have any further questions? And again, it's the first reading, so, you know, put your thoughts together on this, and also with the public, if there's any questions or any ideas that come up, we're going to get a second crack at this at the next meeting. So, Vice President.
Public hearing remains open. Motion to receive the said ordinance on its first reading.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive the said ordinance in its first reading. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Number 17, public hearing advertised, an ordinance of the Town of Middletown, first reading. An ordinance, an amendment to the Town Code of the Town of Middletown, Title 15, Land Use, Chapter 152, Zoning Code, is amending the definition of farm promotion accessory uses in Section 400, entitled Definitions and Additions, definitions for agricultural operations, farm, small, farm, large, and mobile food establishments thereto. Number 2, amending subsection F of Section 703, entitled Accessory Uses and Structures, and 3, amending 722, entitled Farm Promotion Accessory Uses. The Planning Board recommendation is on file.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the public hearing is now open. Is there anyone, do you want to just give a brief overview, Mr. Solicitor?
Yes, Mr. President. So this was prepared at the request of the town council, who had been contacted by, I think, the owners of Simmons Farm. As you know, our zoning code contains a section on farm promotion accessory uses. That section allows farms to engage in other accessory businesses in order to earn additional income, in order to make the farm sustainable. That includes farm stands, farm guest houses, farmers markets, and the like. This would add one item to that list and would allow farms to have a mobile food truck or food cart at their site. The way this is drafted is farms of 10 acres or more, which are defined as a large farm, would be allowed to do this by right. Farms of 10 acres or less than 10 acres would require a permit from the zoning board, because I think the planning board didn't want to have everyone who had a vegetable garden saying that they were going to have a food truck in their front yard. Essentially, there's no more than one truck or cart would be allowed per farm. A portion of the proceeds of the product sold would have to be grown or raised on the farm. Hours of operation would be limited from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. But that's basically it. It would allow farmers one additional accessory use that they could use to maintain their farms. And these are the amendments to the zoning code. There is, the next item is a small amendment to the food truck ordinance that would go along with this.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So let me ask you a question. Why would it be Why would the planning board come up with a certain percentage of the product has to be grown on the farm? What's that intention behind that? Are they, I mean, I don't know any farmers on the planning board.
Well, I think the idea was that, you know, most of these farms are, you know, they're producing something, and that it would be appropriate to say, we're gonna have them, at least some portion. There's not a set percentage, because how do you police that? How do you enforce that? But the idea was that there would be some portion of what is being sold would be grown or produced on the farm. But that's a recommendation. But
yeah, and the only reason I ask that is because if a farm is operating year round, you know, given the weather, there's certain things can't be grown. They could be if you have a greenhouse, but there's more expenses with oil and or however you choose to heat it. That's all that came to mind, really, was that. I don't know if we should restrict them like that, because I know a lot of produce places and farms that actually have to purchase stuff outside of, you know, because say in Georgia and in the Carolinas, their seasons are much longer compared to our seasons up here. So,
yeah, and I think
you know, the window up here is, you know, you're getting about, like, if I stop planting my corn, I plant the second week of May. The ground's too cold before that. So,
and I think,
so, you know, from now until about now, and I'm done. But, you know, if they're operating year round, we may be restricting them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that it actually, looking at the ordinance, that really sort of came from, right now, that there's a provision that allows farmers markets, and there's a provision there saying that the product sold must be grown, raised, or processed in Newport County. So I think it was sort of lending from that to this section, but certainly the intent here was to allow farmers to have another tool in the toolbox to keep the farm sustainable. So that provision is certainly not something that I think the planning board would look at as a deal breaker if the council.
Right, and sometimes, just so you know, it's nice to have that local flavor, believe me, but sometimes financially it doesn't make sense because of all the hidden costs that a lot of people don't see, whether it's sprays, whether it's fertilizers, whether it's the labor, and all of a sudden you can buy at half price and make 100% on this. Why would you even? So I don't want to be so restrictive to handcuff them. Now, and again, who's going to know? But you know, once it's in writing, it's in writing. So, Farmer Flynn.
The kitchen is not my favorite room. I guess my question would be, is that something that a farmer, if it wasn't something that could apply to that particular situation, ask for relief from it?
Well, I mean, the way this is set up, and once again, we're trying not to make farmers jump through too many hoops here. I think if that's a concern, I would just take it out, because once again, the idea here is just to allow the farmers some additional opportunities for revenue.
Right.
I think to the extent that it makes sense during certain times of the year, yeah, I would imagine that, you know, farms would probably at least try to use some of their own products because it probably makes it more attractive to somebody who's going there. But to make it a requirement, I agree, based on what the president said, probably makes sense to take that out.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Mrs. Santos.
Thank you. Mr. Solicitor, Peter?
Yes, ma'am.
Will you define fur-bearing animals? Who in the world has a farm with?
I didn't write that. That was in there already, so I can't take credit for fur-bearing animals.
Are we saying here that farmers are raising fur-bearing animals to be slaughtered for their fur?
That's just the broader definition of agricultural operations. So, and that really sort of comes out, I think, Ron, out of the consistent with the state statute and DEM regulations when it comes to farms. So once again, I can't take credit for that one. We just.
Oh, I don't like it.
Okay.
But that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Farmer Toronto.
How many actual farms do we have in Middletown?
You're gonna have to.
You gotta be kidding.
No, really.
You're gonna have to ask Ms. Santos that. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I
At
mean,
one
they-
time,
Ron,
we had,
Ron might know.
at one time, we had 21 dairy farms in Middletown. How many do you think we
know.
have now?
0.
Thank you.
But I'm curious now, just how many people apply because they get relief for having a farm?
I know, we did, this was, the impetus of this was a request by the folks at Simmons Farm, by a farmer, to do this, and I did, while we were putting this together, I know I got calls at least from 2 other farms in the area that had interest in this and saw this as something positive, so.
So I was anticipating this question because it's come up before.
Ron did his homework.
We identified, and this is research that was done a few years ago, so some of these may not be active farms, so to speak. What we tried to do when we were doing some mapping earlier is identify active farm businesses, but then also identify what would be considered agricultural parcels. So there may not be a farm business on them, but it may be that it's being hayed by somebody that's going around town haying different properties. So when you look at that broader definition, there's over 100 parcels in town that could be considered agricultural or farm parcels. But when you look at actual farm operations, it's maybe a half a dozen to 8 or so. So you've got Simmons Farm. We identified Cousins up on Jefferson Lane. I don't know if he's still in operation. Newport Vineyards, Rhode Island Nurseries, Sweetberry Farm, the Strauss Farm, Rodriguez, and Hugendorn. So those are 8 examples of, and again, a couple of those might not still be in operation, but just examples of some of those of the active farm businesses in town, as opposed to all the agricultural land that might be used by some of the farmers.
Yeah, it's Garmin Farm now over across the across from my mom's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even the church does some over here across from Gourdet. They have those greenhouses that.
Right.
So
What's
there's
it-
a bunch of farming has completely
Yeah,
changed.
No,
I mean,
what do you have to do to be considered a farm?
Throw in a set of coveralls and get on a tractor and have some land.
And a big shovel.
And that's right.
But when we passed this, we've given the capability, and I'm all for farms and helping the farms, but I'm just saying we've allowed now a building with guest facilities in it, where they can do weddings and they can do a lot of different things there.
Yes.
So I was just curious.
Gonna
I mean,
want it.
people can come in and buy a piece of land, and say it's a farm, and start a business. And if you're not going to regulate what they bring in, they might, bring other things in. So I was just curious what it takes.
No, it's a good question, but I think it's identified based on the contiguous parcels on a small or a large.
Yeah, which is why, once again, we didn't want someone who's, growing tomatoes in the backyard to say, now I'm getting a food truck. So somebody who's got something less than 10 acres would have to go to the zoning board to get permission for that.
But I guess I'm saying, do you come to the town and say, hey, I have a farm, and do I have to
Well,
do,
you
what
have
do I
to show
have
you
to
have
do
a
to
farm.
qualify?
These are accessory uses, so it's not something where, I'm a wedding venue that happens to, grow some lettuce in the backyard. It's the primary use of the property has to be farming, and then these are accessories to that.
I get that, right? But if someone comes into town and buys a piece of land and says, I want to start a farm, because I want to be able to get a mobile cart, I want to build a building there, I want to rent out rooms, I want to have a facility, what do they have to do to qualify for that?
They've got to actually create a farm. They've actually got to turn that property into a farm and actually operate it as a farm, and the zoning officer is going to be out taking a look at it. We've had people, for example, a landscape business is not allowed in a residential zone. A nursery is. We've had, and I don't want to say it, but in the past, I guess people have said, oh, I'm not a landscape business, I'm a nursery. So the building official says, okay, where's the nursery stock? Where's the trees you're growing? Let me see your records. How many are you selling these sorts of things? So it has to actually be an actual farm, and they'd have to.
Okay, so as a town, we go out and make sure that goes on.
Absolutely.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good question. It's easy if it's, 10 acres or more. Should it be tied to acreage? I don't know. I think, you know, to be eligible for like a farm, forest, and open space, I think it's 3.5 acres of contiguous land or something like that. But, you know, if you got 2 acres, can you not have a farm? I don't know. That's a good question.
Thanks.
So, okay. Okay, so let's stick to what we're on here, and that's the accessory uses here with the mobile food truck being allowed on a farm. So we do have a public hearing. Is anyone in the audience? Would you ladies like to speak on this, or you just listening? Make sure you're guiding us in the right direction. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Any councilors have any further questions? Okay, Mr. Vice President.
Public hearing remains open. Motion to receive said ordinance on its first reading.
Second.
Motion is second to receive said ordinance on its first reading, and then there'll be a second crack at this at the next meeting. And that's typically when the council either votes on it or it doesn't. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, number 8, they're going to ordinances. Number 18, an ordinance of the Town of Middletown, first reading. An ordinance amendment to the Town Code of the Town of Middletown, Title 11, Business Regulations, Chapter 113, Food Services, by amended. 1, addition, definitions for farm, small, and farm large to Section 02, entitled Definitions, and 2, amending Section 04, entitled Restrictions on Permits. The planning board recommendation is on file.
Motion to receive said ordinance on its first reading.
Second.
Mr. Solicitor.
Yeah, so this is just a corresponding change to the mobile food truck ordinance that, as you know, the operating areas for mobile food trucks are somewhat limited. This would allow mobile food trucks or carts to operate at large and small farms, provided that they're doing so in compliance with the section we just looked at, and would likewise limit operations to between the hours of 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. And the only reason it's separate is one's in the zoning code and one's just a regular ordinance.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this? Okay. So we have a motion and a second to receive said ordinance in its first reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's move on to number 19, Town Administrator. Memorandum of Finance Director, Town Administrator, Contract Award, Middletown 022-001, Valley Trails.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to receive said memorandum. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Mr. Brown.
Yes, the finance director's prepared a memo after receiving the bids for the Valley Trails. Based on the original direction from the council, the recommendation he's put forward is to award a contract to East Coast Construction for $105,250. The grant would pay for $80,000. $25,250 would be funded from the CIP. And essentially, that would construct approximately 1,075 feet of trail, which would essentially extend from the Paul Avenue area down towards Adelaide. I had sent you an email this afternoon. There was a bid alternate that the town included with this bid, which was to actually include an additional 1,719 linear feet of trail. And that additional distance actually represents the original recommendation that came from the staff, which was based on input from the Tree Commission and the Open Space Committee. The price of that work, again, would from East Coast Construction would be $209,900. And in looking at that, the one thing I would ask the council to consider, besides the fact that that would complete the project as it was originally conceived and recommended, it would actually cost the town about 30% less when you look at it on a linear foot basis. So when I look at the cost, there's a $15,000 cost that you don't see, which is related to permitting and coordination with DEM. The smaller project at 1,075 feet would have a linear cost of $111.86 per linear foot. But if we were to do the larger project, it would actually decrease down to $80.49 per linear foot. So what Mark did over the last couple days is he's gone through our capital monies that are set aside, and what he's indicated is that we could use another $100,000 out of the capital improvement program to basically fund the entire project. And what that would do for us is we would finish, you know, essentially the southern end of the project south of Paul Avenue. It would be cheaper for the taxpayer, and it would also be more efficient for Public Works. So once the project's completed, we would focus on maintaining the park, and then we would turn it over to the Tree Commission to plant more trees with the donations that they solicit. If we do this in multiple phases, I think it just becomes more disruptive to what we're trying to achieve. Maybe what I'd ask Warren to do is just walk through the details of the two different projects, and then we can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Sean. Mr. President, members of the council.
Good evening, Mr. Hall.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you. As Sean explained, the project basically runs along High Street, beginning at Paul Avenue down to Adelaide. That would be the first phase, phase one, that's shown in green on your drawings. And then the red dashed line would be phase two. That basically heads down along Adelaide and goes below that row of kind of the main road down in the valley, if I can call it that. There's some large arborvitaes down there. This would go around the back side of that and then connect in on the lower end of the existing trails. And there would be two connecting trails between this phase one and phase two, between the green and the red, so that if you had some folks that didn't want to make the entire loop, they could do halfway, they could do 2/3 of the way, and that's about it. We have culverts included in the project for drainage. It's in accordance with DEM's soil management plan and the ELUR that we have on the site. All that's taken into account in the design. That's it.
Question?
Okay, Mrs. Santos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Mr. Hall, this went out to bid, am I correct?
Yes.
How many bids did we actually receive?
One.
Just this one?
One.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Mrs. Flynn.
A couple of clarifications. Mr. Hall, the red line, so I'm looking at, you know, like a backwards E. I've got a vertical line and then three kind of horizontal lines off of it that lead to the green line. Is that the right one I'm looking at?
Yes.
So which proposal is that? Is that the
1,075 is the green line.
So the green line is the 1,075 feet, and with the green and the red, it's the 2,794 feet?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So I have a calculation question for Mr. Brown. Your $80.50 versus $111.86. Can you give me the formula? Excuse me, the formula that you used to get those?
105,250 for the project plus $15,000 for the permitting equals $120,250 divided by the 1,075 gets to 111.86. On the 2794, you would add $209,900 plus $15,000 equals 224,900 divided by the 2794 gets you to 8049. So, and I think that's another piece is if we postpone, we would have another, you know, when we look at that next section, we would have to spend another probably $15,000 to engage the engineer again to manage the permit and the requirements from the waste division of DEM. So that fixed cost continues each time we mobilize to do a phase of this project.
So I guess the way I'm looking at this, and again, this is, you know, kind of new information, but, you know, comparing the unit cost is only a really good deal if someone else is paying for it, because the taxpayer's cost is really only, excuse me, the 25,000 some odd, right? 25,250. That's really all the taxpayers have to pay. So if you took that divided by the 1075 feet, it's only $23.49 per foot. And, you know, to get, you know, we got $80,000 for the 25,250. I think that's a lot better than getting $80,000 for 130,000. That's how I'm looking at the numbers.
But I think all you're buying is a substandard path. You know, when you look at the project, it's not a really great project just coming down from that one path down to Adelaide. It's a lot of money to just basically come down the road. It doesn't loop. I don't think it's really attractive to someone who's walking. You know, and Karen's here tonight. She can sort of jump on that too. She didn't expect me to say that, but I think generally people walk in loops when they walk, and I don't think they're looking to go up the hill back on the sidewalk. I think they want to continue to walk in the park. So we can talk about the dollars, but I think you have to talk about the experience of the park and how people use it and the experience that they're looking to get. Simply having an extension for $100,000 that goes back up to the road is probably not what people are looking for. I'd suggest that they want to loop back into the property. They want to see the birds and the bugs, and they want to be immersed in the characteristics of the valley itself, not necessarily coming up to the traffic on the roadway on High Street. So, you know, again, looking at what we can do with $100,000, I think it's not the experience of the rest of the property. And again, looking at the cost, and I've been in this room long enough where if, you know, we can cut whose portion of the taxes they are, it's all tax money. When we're spending tax dollars, whether they come from the state or the town, the greater opportunity is with the larger project, and by minimizing our fixed costs, which again, if we're going to wait for the next grant round and do the lower section, we're going to have that $15,000 again, and again, you know, restart the permitting process and discussions with DEM. So those are my observations about it.
I appreciate those observations and, you know, the work that our engineer and the tree commission put into this, but I think that bang for the buck and the priorities of the town, I think that looking at spending $25,000 versus $130,000 for you know, the trails is a hard sell. I'm not sure that I can support that. I think that I know that these grant opportunities come up annually, and I think this is a great start, and it's a great value for our taxpayers to do as proposed.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Slade. Mr. Welch.
Thanks. Just my thoughts are that I don't want to go on the record as somewhat agreeing with Terry, but I do. I think that when we looked at this initially, that the council wanted to go back and only spend the least amount of money it had to, which was the 20%, and to cut down the trails because of that. And we can certainly, I mean, that's great to get a piece. There's a grant, we apply, and we get out to Adelaide. That's nice. I go by that quite a bit. I don't think there's any overcrowding on the valley trails. I think that I would be in favor of waiting for another DEM proposal or grant cycle. And yes, I understand the math that it's less dollars per foot the more you do, but I don't know that that's considering the fact that if the state were to pay 80% of it, that would eat up the 30% savings per foot if we did in 2 times. I understand the permitting process is also $15,000, but I don't think that math is completely apples to apples. And
we have plenty of walking trails. We have a great facility down there. This would add yet another piece. I'd rather see us concentrate on pickleball. I think the money should go there. Thank you.
Sean, where would the additional money, I know you said earlier, Mark, Finance Director, where would that money come from?
It would come from the capital improvement program.
Okay. So those are tax dollars.
Again, we go back, everything's a taxpayer's dollar.
Yeah, okay.
We wouldn't be raising taxes in the budget, this budget or the next budget to pay for this.
We would not.
We would not, right. There's no additional tax burden here.
Okay. Councilor Toronto.
Yeah, when I'm looking at this warrant, you know, Sean makes a point, you know, we got a direct shot going down the road. There's no turnaround to come back to where you started from, right? But is there, under the phase one, is there any way phase one could be less, like something that has both these trails and the connection, so like, you know, coming down this way, and then phase two can extend it further south?
I think you could come up with some alternate layout to make phase one a little more attractive.
Yeah, and maybe it connects, and then phase two can go a little deeper.
You could take the 1,075 feet and maybe half that and do 6, whatever it comes out to, 5 and change, 537 and a half, you know,
Yeah, like
just
if you came down to that cross.
make it a
point,
short
right?
loop.
Make it a little shorter loop, where you kind of go that 210 across and up.
You could do an alternate
I don't even know
layout.
if you need the 370, or you use the 375, and then maybe phase two, you know, we get more funding, you know, it's less money on the taxpayer, we do the final loop. Because I know we're also looking at Paradise Park, right? And we're going to look at Paradise Park as well, as putting some trails up there. So that's, I would agree with Tom and what he said, and Terry. But if we could redesign it and do it in phase one and loop it, that would be pretty good too.
There's a lot of options. There's options.
Sean, if, Councilor Logan.
Quick question, just to refresh my memory. The grant that's awarded here, was 80,000 the top line for that grant, or was it more? I know we had to match up to 20%, but I thought 80 was the low end. Am I wrong when I say that?
No, 80,000 is the amount that was provided to the town.
I didn't know if it flexed up if we provided more.
No.
Tried.
Sean, if we only do the 1,075 feet, the green line, and we wait for another round of grant money, potentially, what's the time frame there? Any idea?
Another year.
Another year? Okay. If it's awarded. So the match then would roughly be the same? Don't know?
It would depend on what was awarded. Yeah,
Oh.
but roughly.
Okay.
It's usually the same.
And where would those dollars come from then?
I don't know. We would cross that bridge when we submit the grant.
Would it be additional tax dollars then versus no additional tax dollars now?
I don't know the answer. So we've talked about pickleball courts. I mean, each one of these has potential funding sources, each of these projects. I don't see, as I sit here now, we can do this project with, complete this project and do the pickleball courts. There's ways to do that. I don't think.
One's not tied to the other?
No, I wouldn't suggest that if you do this, you can't do pickleball courts. The challenge of pickleball courts was getting a location. It was not a financial issue, and I indicated that earlier. So, I think one of the things to focus on here is, this is the only, or the closest to open space or recreation on the west side of town. You don't have parks on the west side of town. They're very limited. You have Linden School, which we're talking about with the pickleball, and you have this property. But as you go north, you don't have recreational opportunities. They're all on the east side of town. So can you do both? I think you can. And if you couldn't, I would have said that. I wouldn't have brought this recommendation forward. So
Okay. Okay, what does the group want to, Mr. Welch?
I just, Sean, to be clear, so if it was $113,000 that the town had to come up with, you said, or Mark, there was $100,000 in the CIP budget for this year or next year, and then the following year is another 100,000. So the 113 would come out of that 2-year $200,000?
No, we would make an appropriation out of the CIP this year to pay for it.
Okay. So my point is that the money's still coming out of a fund that the taxpayers paid for, as opposed to if we were to get funding from the state, potentially, possibly 80% of that would be paid.
So if we took it out of the beach fund, you would have a different opinion? You could take it out of the beach fund, or we could take it out of the PPV fund. I mean, there's non-tax options. It just seems that this is the most appropriate place to take it, if that's sort of how you're sort of coloring your recommendation. If you want a non-tax dollar, I can provide you a recommendation for a non-tax dollar.
So, you know, again, I'm just not sure, because we can take money from pots, you know, and get something done, that's an appropriate evaluation strategy.
So I would look at, when we did our community survey, which we haven't really spent a lot of time with, the #1 recreational opportunity that people were looking at were passive recreational activities like this. And again, I'd point out, you don't have them on the west side of town, they're only on the east side of town. So, you know, again, if we want to look at how I would evaluate it, those are the type of things. It isn't based on whether it's a tax dollar or non-tax dollar. It's, can we put a project and complete a project, you know, for the residents that live within that area of the community. So I just want to be clear with that. It's not just I found some money and we can do it. I think it makes a lot of sense for the community based on documentation that we have and needs that are demonstrated. You know, again through, and I'll use the survey that was done of the community of what kind of recreational opportunities are we looking for. This is sort of it.
I'm not saying it doesn't have value to the community, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that the bang for the buck with these grants and the matching monies is something that we need to take advantage of, and that it can be phased. I mean, 1 year away is not a long time to wait on something that isn't really on our priority list.
So but next year you could look for the grant money to pay for the pickleball courts. Or, because every time you sort of stack one of these projects up, you're going to pick and choose a year from now which one you're going to do. There's not an infinite number of grant applications you're going to submit. So a year from now, if we push this off, we're going to sit here and we're either going to pay for pickleball courts out of pocket, or we're going to stack up all of these grants and put them in order 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, again, postponing. You know, if we're going to postpone it, it just stacks up with the other things that we're trying to get done. And again, this is a project that's ready to go. It's been through citizen committees. Again, it's something that, you know, that is measurable as far as demand. It seems like it should go. Again, if the council wants to move in a different direction, that's fine. But we just ask you to take a vote on it and decide. I don't think there has to be a lot of discussion. I don't think someone needs to somehow qualify what I said or didn't say. I think you voted on its merits and we move on.
No, but we take your opinion, you know, you value your opinion.
Yep.
I mean, you live it day in, day out, whether we agree or not, we still, you know, want to hear what you have to say. I mean, you're the administrator, so. Okay. Let's take a vote. Thank you, Warren.
Thanks, Warren.
Thank you, sir.
Number 20, resolution of the council in reference to contract award MIDD-022-001, Valley Trails to the East, Valley Trails to East Coast Landscape and Construction.
Well, there's two choices, right?
No, you have the contract for the 105, which is the grant.
Yep.
If someone wanted to make a motion to amend it, then you could amend it, but the project that you have before you is the
Okay.
project that
Okay.
you prioritized.
Thank you. Motion to amend the resolution to read as follows. The bid price of $105,250.00 be changed to $209,900, and that the additional funding of $9,250 is changed to $113,900.
Second.
Okay.
So it's a motion to
So
amend the,
this is,
What's that?
that's only a motion to amend the resolution.
Right, that's all that is. We're not voting to pass that, that's just a motion to amend it. And then we can vote yea and nay on that, okay?
so that's.
Based on the administrator's recommendation, that's the motion based on his recommendation.
That would
If
be
you
the-
don't agree with that, then we vote against it when we get to the passing the said resolution,
So that's
okay?
spending 130,000 versus the 25,000. That's what the amendment says?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have a motion, and I'll second it, to amend that, just to amend that resolution. We're not voting on the resolution yet, okay? Motion is second, to amend said resolution. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So that passes. Now we're going to vote on the resolution. Okay. So, Mr. Vice President,
Motion to pass said resolution as amended.
Second?
we have a motion, a second, to pass said resolution. Any further discussion?
So now the resolution is saying spend $130,000, not 25,000.
That's correct. That's correct.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Repeat?
It's what the town administrator is recommending. Do all of it,
We're voting now on the whole thing.
on the whole thing.
Okay.
That we just amended the resolution based on his recommendation. We just voted on that. Now, we're going to vote to either approve that or deny that. Okay?
So we're
Any further discussion?
approving to spend $130,000. If you vote against it, you're not spending $130,000.
You're saying what you wanted? Yes. That's correct. Okay. Any further discussion? I'm kind of torn. I mean, I understand, I think, I do want to get it all done. And then I look at, will the second round of grant pay for knock that cost down? I think it will. And I think the flavor of the council right now is to hold off, but that's just my opinion. So,
One way to find out.
go ahead.
I already said it.
you
Motion to
did.
pass said resolution.
Oh, that's right, we do have a second, sorry. Motion is second to pass said resolution, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, so Sean, the council wants to just do the first phase, okay?
You have to go.
And we'll come
So
back.
now you have to vote on the original.
Say that.
Original motion.
Yep,
Vote on the original, resolution.
Never amend it.
okay,
We should have just voted on that and then been done with it. Okay,
well, we could,
we're good.
yeah,
Let's roll.
okay.
So now do we have to make a
9:30,
motion
last time.
to?
We do have to make a motion on the original resolution,
Is that all I have to say?
yes.
I make a motion to vote on the original resolution.
Second?
Original resolution.
Pass the original resolution.
What?
To pass the original resolution.
That's
Motion to pass the original resolution.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass the original resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anybody opposed? Okay, number 21, communication of tax assessor, and thank you for that discussion. Communication of tax assessor in reference to cancellation of taxes for certain Middletown residents.
Motion to receive said communication.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and number 22, resolution of the council in reference to cancellation of taxes for certain Middletown residents.
Motion to pass said resolution.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass. Is there any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Boards and committees, number 23, communication of Chris Souza in reference to resignation from the Middletown Zoning Board of Review.
Motion to receive said communication with regret.
Second?
Okay, a motion and a second to receive said communication with regret. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion adjourned.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, everybody, thank you. Good job. Okay.